Hello, my friend. Are you brave enough to uncover the truth behind the most chilling ghost stories in America? From the haunted halls of century-old mansions to the eerie figures that still roam the streets at night, these are the true stories that gave birth to some of the scariest legends in the country. But what if the real story is even more terrifying than the ghostly tales themselves? Get ready, because we're about to reveal 30 of the most spine-chilling real-life ghost stories ever told in the USA. Hold on tight, because things are about to get really scary. Story 1. The Bell Witch, a haunting in Tennessee. In the early 1800s, the quiet town of Adams, Tennessee, became the site of one of America's most infamous hauntings, the story of the Bell Witch. The Bell family, led by patriarch John Bell, were prominent farmers who had moved to the area for a fresh start. However, their peaceful life turned into a waking nightmare when a series of unexplainable events began to unfold. It started innocently enough. In 1817, John Bell noticed strange animals lurking around his farm. One evening, he spotted a dog-like creature with the face of a rabbit watching him from the shadows. When he aimed his rifle and fired, the creature vanished. Soon after, the family began hearing scratching noises on the walls, followed by faint whispers and disembodied laughter echoing through their home. As the weeks passed, the disturbances grew more aggressive. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed shut without warning, and invisible hands tugged at the children's hair while they slept. Betsy Bell, the youngest daughter, became the primary target. She suffered violent physical attacks. Her hair was pulled, her face was slapped, and she often woke up covered in bruises. The Bell family turned to their neighbors for help, but even they fell victim to the witch's torment. When visitors stayed overnight at the Bell home, they heard sinister voices mocking them or felt unseen hands pinching them in the dark. Word of the haunting spread quickly, drawing curious onlookers and skeptics alike. The entity revealed itself through a series of chilling conversations. Calling herself Kate, the spirit claimed to have two goals: to torment John Bell and to prevent Betsy from marrying her suitor, Joshua Gardner. Kate seemed to know everything about the Bell family and their visitors, often reciting prayers or gossiping about town secrets to prove her supernatural powers. Despite numerous attempts to rid themselves of the spirit, the haunting persisted. John Bell's health began to deteriorate mysteriously. He experienced seizures, and his strength waned rapidly. On December 20th, 1820, John was found dead in his bed. Beside him was a vial of strange black liquid. The family claimed that the witch had poisoned him, boasting, "I gave him his medicine," during the night. Even after John Bell's death, Kate continued to haunt the family sporadically. Eventually, she claimed she would leave, but promised to return in 7 years. True to her word, she reappeared in 1828, though her presence was far less menacing. After a brief period of activity, she vanished, leaving behind a legacy of fear and unanswered questions. To this day, the Bell Witch remains one of America's most famous ghost stories, inspiring countless books, movies, and legends. Some believe the spirit was a manifestation of family secrets or guilt, while others swear it was a malevolent entity with unfinished business. The Bell Witch Cave, located near the original farm, continues to draw thrill seekers hoping to catch a glimpse of the supernatural. Are you brave enough to visit? Story 2. The Winchester Mystery House, a labyrinth of spirits. In San Jose, California, stands one of the most enigmatic and haunted structures in the United States, the Winchester Mystery House. Built in the late 19th century, this sprawling mansion was the brainchild of Sarah Winchester, heiress to the Winchester rifle fortune. But what drove her to construct this architectural oddity? According to legend, it was fear, not of the living, but of the dead. Sarah Winchester's troubles began after a string of personal tragedies. Her infant daughter, Annie, died of a mysterious illness in 1866. A few years later, her husband, William Wirt Winchester, succumbed to tuberculosis. Stricken with grief, Sarah sought solace from a medium, who revealed a chilling message. Her family was cursed by the spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles. The medium warned that Sarah needed to atone for the bloodshed by building a house for the restless souls. She was told to keep building without stopping. If construction ceased, her own death would follow. Determined to evade her fate, Sarah purchased an 8-room farmhouse in San Jose in 1886 and began an endless renovation project. For 38 years, construction on the Winchester house never stopped, not even for a single day. The result was a labyrinth of twisting hallways, staircases leading to nowhere, doors that opened into walls, and windows that overlooked other rooms. At its peak, the mansion had 160 rooms, 2,000 doors, 47 fireplaces, and 10,000 windows. Many believe these bizarre features were meant to confuse the vengeful spirits haunting Sarah. Visitors to the house have reported strange occurrences over the years. Footsteps echo in empty hallways, ghostly figures appear in windows, and unexplained cold spots linger in certain rooms. One of the most infamous spirits is that of a former caretaker, Clyde, who is often seen pushing a wheelbarrow in the basement. Others claim to have seen Sarah herself wandering the halls, forever trapped in her creation. The mansion's seance room is particularly unsettling. It is said that Sarah would lock herself inside every night to communicate with the spirits and receive instructions for the house's construction. The room had only one entrance but 3 exits, one of which was a hidden trapdoor. When Sarah Winchester passed away in 1922, the construction abruptly stopped, leaving behind a house that defied logic and reason. Her obituary made no mention of the haunting, but the stories persisted, drawing curiosity and fear in equal measure. Today, the Winchester Mystery House is a popular tourist attraction. Visitors come to explore its bewildering architecture and learn about the woman who dedicated her life to appeasing the dead. But be warned, many claim the spirits Sarah tried to placate are still there, lurking in the endless maze she built for them. Do you dare wander the halls where the living and the dead converge? Story 3. The Lizzie Borden House, a murderer's ghostly legacy. In the quiet town of Fall River, Massachusetts, stands a house forever marked by one of America's most infamous unsolved murders. The Lizzie Borden House, now a bed-and-breakfast, is as notorious for its bloody history as it is for the paranormal activity said to haunt its halls. On August 4th, 1892, the Borden family home became the site of a gruesome double murder. Andrew Borden and his wife, Abby, were brutally killed with a hatchet in broad daylight. Andrew was found slumped on the sitting room couch, his face nearly unrecognizable from the blows. Upstairs, Abby lay face down in a pool of blood, having been struck repeatedly in the back of the head. Lizzie Borden, Andrew's daughter, quickly became the prime suspect. Her inconsistent testimony and strange behavior only fueled the suspicion, but a lack of physical evidence led to her acquittal. Despite her plea of innocence, the grisly rhyme immortalized her in American folklore. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Though Lizzie lived the rest of her life in Fall River, she was ostracized by the community, and whispers of her guilt never faded. But the murders left more than a stain on Lizzie's reputation. They left a supernatural imprint on the house itself. Guests and staff at the Lizzie Borden house have reported spine-chilling encounters over the years. In the sitting room, where Andrew Borden was killed, visitors often feel an oppressive presence or hear phantom footsteps pacing the floor. Some claim to see a shadowy figure resembling Andrew himself, staring silently at them before vanishing. Upstairs in Abby's room, people have felt icy hands brush against their skin or heard faint cries echoing from nowhere. Paranormal investigators have captured EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, of ghostly whispers, including one that chillingly said, "Help me." Lizzie's bedroom is also a hot spot for ghostly activity. Some guests report waking up to the sensation of someone sitting on the edge of the bed. Others claim to hear the sound of a woman weeping softly in the darkness. Could it be the spirit of Lizzie, forever tormented by the accusations that shadowed her life? One of the most unsettling spots in the house is the basement. Visitors describe hearing the clang of unseen objects, sudden cold drafts, and the unmistakable feeling of being watched. Some believe the spirits of the Borden family are trapped here, unable to rest after the violent crimes that ended their lives. Today, the Lizzie Borden house offers overnight stays and ghost tours, attracting thrill seekers and paranormal enthusiasts from around the world. For those brave enough to spend the night, the experience is unforgettable and often unnerving. Are the restless spirits of Andrew and Abby seeking justice? Or is Lizzie herself haunting the place where her life changed forever? One thing is certain. The Lizzie Borden house is a chilling reminder that some stories never truly end. Story 4. Eastern State Penitentiary. Haunted echoes of brutal confinement. In the heart of Philadelphia, the crumbling ruins of Eastern State Penitentiary stand as a chilling reminder of a once radical experiment in prison reform. Opened in 1829, the penitentiary was designed to promote reflection and penance through solitary confinement. Instead, it became a breeding ground for despair, madness, and, many believe, lingering spirits of those who suffered within its walls. Eastern State was revolutionary for its time. Prisoners were kept in complete isolation, with meals delivered through small slots in their cell doors. They had no contact with the outside world or each other. Even when inmates were moved through the halls, they wore hoods to prevent them from seeing or being seen. This extreme isolation drove many prisoners to insanity. By the early 1900s, overcrowding forced the abandonment of solitary confinement, but the brutal conditions persisted. Inmates were subjected to horrific punishments, including the iron gag, which restrained prisoners in a way that could cause fatal injuries. Others were chained in freezing water baths or forced to sit in the mad chair, where they were tightly bound for days at a time. When the prison closed in 1971, the suffering didn't end, it seemed to linger. Visitors, guards, and even paranormal investigators have reported a range of eerie encounters. One of the most common sightings is of shadowy figures darting between the cells. These figures are often seen in cell block 12, which is notorious for its oppressive atmosphere. Visitors have also reported seeing a spectral figure in the shape of a man pacing the hallways. Cell block 4 is known for echoing with disembodied laughter, whispers, and even screams. Tour guides and guests have captured strange EVP, electronic voice phenomena, recordings that seem to carry messages from beyond the grave. One of the most famous stories involves a locksmith who was working to remove an old cell door lock. As he dismantled the lock, he described feeling an overwhelming wave of energy, as though a portal had been opened. He claimed to see ghostly faces appearing in the cell walls and felt hands gripping him, though no one was there. Guests frequently report sudden drops in temperature and feelings of being watched or touched. Some describe feeling a heavy, unseen force pressing down on them in certain cells. Several spirits are believed to haunt Eastern State. The warden, a spectral figure wearing a uniform, is occasionally seen in the administrative offices. Some say he patrols the halls, still maintaining control over his prison. Inmate Joseph Taylor. In 1884, Joseph Taylor murdered a fellow inmate with a pair of scissors. His violent act and subsequent execution seem to have left a dark stain on the penitentiary. Al Capone's Phantom Torment. The infamous gangster served time at Eastern State and reportedly claimed to be haunted by the ghost of James Clark, one of the victims of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Capone often screamed at night, begging Jimmy to leave him alone. Today, Eastern State Penitentiary is a historic site and museum. It draws visitors from around the world who come to explore its eerie corridors and learn about its history. For thrill seekers, the site hosts nighttime ghost tours and Halloween events, where the faint of heart are warned to stay away. Are the whispers and shadows merely echoes of a tormented past? Or do the spirits of those who suffered still roam the penitentiary? Seeking peace? Enter at your own risk, and you may find out for yourself. Story 5. The Stanley Hotel. Inspiration for terror. Nestled in the majestic Colorado Rockies, the Stanley Hotel is a place of breathtaking beauty, but also one of fear and mystery. While its stunning exterior and rich history draw thousands of visitors each year, there is something more that lingers within its walls, an eerie presence that seems to stir in the shadows, never quite leaving. This chilling energy is what made the Stanley Hotel famous. It was the inspiration for Stephen King's The Shining. The Stanley Hotel was built in 1909 by F.O. Stanley, a wealthy inventor who revolutionized the automobile industry. After falling ill to tuberculosis, Stanley sought the pure, fresh air of Colorado for relief, and upon finding Estes Park, he decided to build a lavish hotel. The Stanley Hotel opened its doors to guests in 1909 and became a luxurious getaway in the heart of the mountains. However, it wasn't long before strange events began to unfold within its grand walls. While many guests enjoyed their stays, others reported odd occurrences, unexplained noises, and a sense of being watched. By the 1970s, when Stephen King and his wife visited the hotel, the eerie atmosphere was impossible to ignore. The Kings stayed in room 217, which would later become the inspiration for The Shining. The Stanley Hotel has long been associated with paranormal activity, with several areas of the hotel being particularly notorious for their ghostly encounters. Visitors and staff alike have reported hearing unexplained piano music, even when no one is playing the keys. The sounds are often attributed to Flora Stanley, the wife of the hotel's founder, who was an accomplished pianist. Some guests claim to hear her play at night in the ballroom, while others have seen her ghostly figure, still elegantly dressed, walking the halls of the hotel. Room 217 is perhaps the most famous in the hotel, and the most haunted. During the early days of the hotel, a tragic incident occurred when a chambermaid named Elizabeth Wilson was severely injured by an explosion in the room. She survived, but her presence never left the room. Guests staying in room 217 have reported strange occurrences, such as their belongings being moved, lights flickering on and off, and even an unseen presence sitting on the edge of their bed. Those who have stayed here often wake up in the middle of the night to the feeling of someone gently pulling the covers off them, or to the sensation of an unseen figure standing at the foot of the bed. The fourth floor of the Stanley Hotel is considered one of the most haunted areas. It is here that guests have reported seeing shadowy figures, hearing footsteps echo down the long, empty corridors, and feeling sudden cold drafts despite the warm, high-altitude air outside. The most commonly seen apparition is that of a man dressed in a long black coat, walking the hallways in silence, only to disappear when approached. The hotel's history suggests that this could be the spirit of one of its past guests, or possibly a former resident who never checked out. Staff members working late at night have also had their share of unsettling experiences. One common occurrence involves guests hearing a child's laughter or the sound of footsteps running through empty corridors. The source of the laughter is often traced to the ghostly children who are said to haunt the hotel. Children who, according to legend, died in the early years of the hotel's operation. One particularly disturbing experience occurred when a member of the hotel staff, while cleaning one of the guest rooms, felt a strong force pushing them against the wall. They later discovered that the room had been vacant for hours, with no one else inside. The Stanley Hotel's unnerving atmosphere would play a key role in Stephen King's inspiration for The Shining. In 1974, King and his wife stayed in the hotel during its off-season, when the place was mostly empty. The experience of being in an isolated, almost desolate hotel struck him profoundly, and the eerie feeling of the hotel's emptiness would later form the backdrop for his novel about a haunted hotel and a disintegrating family. King himself has acknowledged that the hotel was a huge inspiration for The Shining, but he also said that it was the energy of the hotel that triggered his imagination, especially the long, dark hallways and the ominous sense that something unseen was watching. Today, the Stanley Hotel is a popular tourist destination, attracting visitors from around the world who come for its rich history, stunning architecture, and of course, its haunted reputation. Guided ghost tours run regularly, where visitors explore the dark corners of the hotel and hear stories of paranormal encounters that have been documented throughout the years. Many guests come hoping to witness something supernatural themselves. Some claim to feel cold spots in certain areas of the hotel, while others report seeing flickers of light or shadowy figures moving through the hallways. For those seeking a truly spine-chilling experience, the Stanley Hotel also hosts a number of special events, including overnight stays, where guests can explore the hotel's haunted history and potentially have their own encounters with the spirits that call it home. Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, the Stanley Hotel offers an unforgettable experience. From the unsettling sounds of phantom piano music to the restless spirits that roam its hallways, it's clear that this stunning hotel is more than just a beautiful retreat in the mountains. It's a place where the past and its restless souls continue to linger. Do you dare to visit? Because at the Stanley Hotel, the question isn't if you'll encounter a ghost, but when. Story 6. The LaLaurie Mansion, New Orleans House of Horrors. In the historic heart of New Orleans French Quarter, nestled on Royal Street, stands a mansion that has become one of the most infamous locations in the world, the LaLaurie Mansion. Its beauty and elegance conceal a horrifying past, a past that has led to its reputation as a site of unspeakable cruelty and paranormal activity. The mansion is a chilling reminder of a dark chapter in American history, where horrors were hidden behind wealth and social status. The LaLaurie Mansion was built in 1832 by Dr. Louis LaLaurie, a respected physician, and his wife, Delphine LaLaurie, a woman of high social standing in New Orleans. The mansion, designed with all the grandeur expected of the time, reflected the couple's wealth and influence. The two were known to host extravagant parties, inviting the city's elite to admire their opulent home. The LaLauries had a reputation for being charming and generous, but beneath the surface, a far darker truth was lurking. Dr. LaLaurie was well regarded in New Orleans society, a doctor with a solid reputation for his medical expertise. However, his work in medicine went beyond the bounds of acceptable practice, as he became known for his inhumane treatments and experiments. His wife, Delphine, was admired for her beauty and social grace, but she was rumored to have a much darker side, one that would emerge only behind closed doors. The LaLauries owned a number of enslaved people, as was common for wealthy families of that time. While most slave owners kept their enslaved individuals in servitude under the guise of care, the LaLauries' treatment was far from that of a typical slave-owner relationship. It was sadistic, cruel, and terrifying. The LaLaurie Mansion remained a symbol of wealth and prestige until one fateful day in 1834. On April 10th of that year, a fire broke out in the kitchen of the mansion. A servant named Leah, who had been enslaved by the LaLaurie family, was said to have started the fire while trying to escape from the attic, where she had been locked away by Delphine LaLaurie. In an attempt to put out the flames, Leah jumped from a window, breaking her leg in the process. This desperate act caught the attention of neighbors, who rushed to help, and that's when they discovered the horrors lurking inside the mansion. When the fire department arrived at the scene, the truth of the LaLaurie household was uncovered. As the firemen battled the flames, they gained access to the upper floors of the mansion and discovered a scene of unimaginable horror. In the attic, they found a room filled with enslaved individuals who had been cruelly imprisoned, tortured, and mutilated by the LaLaurie family. The enslaved people were locked in chains, emaciated, and covered in fresh wounds, many of them mutilated in grotesque ways. Some had their limbs removed, others were strapped to tables and experimented upon, their bodies a testament to the cruelty that had been inflicted upon them. Some were found alive, though in a state of severe physical and mental trauma, while others had perished from the brutal treatments. The firemen discovered bodies and individuals who had been tortured beyond recognition. There were also reports of a mad scientist type of experimentation, with victims who appeared to have undergone surgical procedures meant to cause pain and suffering. It was a shocking and horrific scene that caused an immediate public uproar. When the news broke, an angry mob gathered outside the mansion, demanding justice for the victims. In the chaos, Delphine LaLaurie fled the city, escaping with the help of her family and disappearing into obscurity. Dr. LaLaurie vanished as well, and both were never seen again, though rumors circulated that Delphine traveled to Paris. Some say she never truly escaped her past, while others believe she lived out her final years in exile, haunted by her actions. With the LaLaurie family gone, the mansion stood empty for years. But the mansion's disturbing reputation only grew. Over time, The LaLaurie mansion became synonymous with the horrific atrocities that had taken place there, and stories began to emerge about strange occurrences in and around the house. The once glamorous home had become a beacon for the supernatural, haunted by the spirits of those who had suffered within its walls. In the decades that followed, various owners came and went, but none were able to keep the mansion for long. The building's notoriety as a haunted location seemed to repel anyone who tried to call it home. Visitors to the mansion began to report strange occurrences, cold spots, the sensation of being watched, and unexplained noises. Those brave enough to venture inside claimed to have felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as if the walls themselves were soaked in the pain and suffering of the past. The spirits of the enslaved individuals who were tortured within the walls of the LaLaurie mansion are said to still haunt the property. Visitors often speak of feeling an unsettling presence, hearing anguished whispers, or witnessing shadowy figures in the windows. The most chilling accounts come from those who have felt something physical, hands pressing on their shoulders or the sensation of being grabbed by invisible forces. Perhaps the most famous ghost associated with the mansion is that of Madame Delphine LaLaurie herself. Her spirit is often said to roam the mansion, dressed in the elegant clothing of her time, her ghostly figure appearing near the windows or wandering through the rooms. Some reports claim to have seen her watching from the upstairs balcony, staring down with cold, malevolent eyes. The spirits of the tortured slaves are also said to appear, often in the attic where many of the worst atrocities occurred. People have reported seeing figures wearing tattered clothing, their faces twisted in pain. Others claim to hear the sounds of chains rattling in the attic or hear the faint cries of those who were once imprisoned there. The LaLaurie mansion still stands as one of the most infamous locations in New Orleans. Though it is now a private residence and not open to the public, the mansion remains a popular subject for paranormal investigations and ghost tours. Visitors flock to the French Quarter in search of a glimpse of the mansion's dark past, hoping to encounter one of its restless spirits. Despite its eerie reputation, the mansion has undergone renovations over the years, yet the sense of malevolence lingers. The mansion has become part of the dark lore of New Orleans, attracting those who are fascinated by the supernatural and the tragic history of the LaLaurie family. Even now, the question remains, are the spirits of the LaLaurie mansion's tortured victims seeking justice? Or are they trapped in the same nightmare that once consumed them? The answers, it seems, are buried within the haunted walls of this infamous house. Story 7. Gettysburg Battlefield. The twilight sun bled into the horizon, painting the fields of Gettysburg in hues of amber and crimson. Lisa Caldwell, a history teacher with an unshakable fascination for the Civil War, had waited years to walk this hallowed ground. She taught her students about Pickett's Charge, the high water mark of the Confederacy, and the infamous Devil's Den, but now she stood among the rolling fields where so many had fought and fallen. The air here felt heavy, thick with a weight she couldn't explain. Lisa walked slowly, her boots crunching against the frosted grass. A small group of tourists meandered in the distance, their laughter out of place against the solemnity of the land. As she approached the edge of the field, the whisper of a breeze brushed her cheek, carrying a sound so faint it could have been imagined. A murmur, a rustle, almost like voices. She froze, her pulse quickening. Just the wind, she murmured, shaking her head. But the unease lingered, an echo in her chest that refused to fade. Later that evening, Lisa joined a ghost tour. The guide, a wiry man with a grizzled beard and a storyteller's voice, led the group through the battlefield, weaving tales of soldiers who could not rest. The spirits here are not malevolent, he assured them, his lantern casting flickering shadows across his face. They're men caught in time, tied to this place by the horrors they endured. Some say they're still fighting, still marching. Others believe they're searching for their comrades, lost in the chaos of war. Lisa's ears perked up when the guide stopped near a monument and lowered his voice. There's a story about a Union soldier named Thomas Hayes, he began. He served with the 20th Maine. Folks say he was a kind man, a teacher before the war, much like yourself, he added, glancing at Lisa. But Hayes never made it home. Witnesses claim his spirit still marches along the edge of the field, searching for his brothers in arms. Lisa felt a shiver crawl up her spine. The story settled in her mind like a seed, rooting itself in her thoughts. Could it be true? Could the battlefield still hold remnants of its violent past? That night, sleep eluded her. The hotel room was comfortable enough, but Lisa's thoughts churned. She kept replaying the guide's words, picturing the soldiers' spectral march. Finally, unable to resist the pull, she dressed and drove back to the battlefield. The roads were nearly deserted, the town quiet under a blanket of stars. She parked near the fields and stepped out into the cool night. The moon hung high, casting a ghostly glow over the landscape. Lisa walked slowly, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The monuments loomed like sentinels, their stone faces etched with the names of the fallen. And then she heard it, the rhythmic sound of boots striking the earth. It was faint at first, but as she strained her ears, it grew louder. Her breath hitched. She turned off her flashlight and stood still, her heart pounding in her chest. Out of the mist, a figure emerged. He wore the blue uniform of a Union soldier, his musket slung over one shoulder. His face was pale and worn, his expression one of quiet determination. Lisa's throat went dry as she watched him march, his form almost translucent in the moonlight. "Thomas," she whispered, though she didn't know why. The soldier stopped. His gaze met hers, and for a moment, Lisa felt an overwhelming wave of sorrow and longing, as though she were staring into the soul of history itself. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, the figure vanished, leaving only the sound of the wind rustling through the grass. In the days that followed, Lisa couldn't shake the encounter. Had she truly seen the ghost of Thomas Hayes? Or was it a trick of her imagination, a product of her fascination with the past? Determined to uncover the truth, she dove into research, scouring archives and records for any mention of Hayes. She discovered that Thomas Hayes had indeed fought with the 20th Maine at Gettysburg. He had been a teacher before the war, just as the guide had said. Letters from his comrades described him as a gentle soul, always putting others before himself. Hayes had fallen during the desperate fight at Little Round Top. His body never recovered. Lisa felt a connection to him she couldn't explain. She returned to Gettysburg often, leaving flowers at the monument dedicated to the 20th Maine. Each visit brought her a sense of peace, as though she were honoring not just Hayes, but all the soldiers who had fought and died there. Though she never saw the soldier again, Lisa often felt his presence, a quiet reassurance that the past was not truly gone. It lingered in the air, in the whispers of the wind, and in the memories etched into the land. Gettysburg, she realized, was more than a battlefield. It was a testament to courage, sacrifice, and the enduring echoes of history. Story 8. The Queen Mary, the ghost ship of Long Beach. Docked in Long Beach, California, the Queen Mary is a retired British ocean liner that once sailed the high seas, carrying celebrities, dignitaries, and thousands of passengers between the United States and Europe. Today, it sits as a museum, hotel, and restaurant. But the legend of the Queen Mary is far from a calm, quiet tale of maritime history. Instead, it is one of the most haunted ships in the world, its dark past and eerie occurrences drawing visitors from around the globe. The Queen Mary's haunting reputation has earned it the moniker the Ghost Ship, with numerous reports of ghostly apparitions, strange sounds, and inexplicable events. The Queen Mary was originally commissioned in 1929 by the Cunard White Star Line, and its maiden voyage was set for 1936. At the time, it was the largest and most luxurious ocean liner ever built. Throughout its service, the ship sailed across the Atlantic, carrying both the rich and famous, as well as soldiers during World War II. During the war, the Queen Mary was converted into a troop ship, and it became known as the Gray Ghost due to its gray camouflage and stealthy speed. Tragically, in 1942, the Queen Mary collided with a smaller ship, the HMS Curacao, in a dense fog. The collision resulted in the death of over 300 men on the Curacao, though the Queen Mary itself did not suffer significant damage. The event haunted the ship and its crew, with many later claiming that the spirits of the men who perished in the collision still roam the ship. After the war, the Queen Mary was restored to luxury service, but it was eventually retired in 1967 and sold to the city of Long Beach, where it was transformed into a hotel, restaurant, and tourist attraction. It was here that the ship's reputation as a haunted vessel began to grow. Over the years, the Queen Mary has been the subject of numerous paranormal investigations and ghostly reports. Visitors and staff have experienced a range of unexplained phenomena, from ghostly apparitions to cold spots and phantom sounds. The ship's dark history, tragic events, and eerie atmosphere make it a prime location for paranormal activity, and there are several areas on board that are known for being particularly haunted. The most haunted areas of the ship: the engine room. One of the most notorious haunted spots on the Queen Mary is the engine room, a vast, noisy space that was once the heart of the ship's power. It is believed that many of the ship's crew members died in accidents or while working in this dangerous area. Visitors to the engine room have reported hearing disembodied voices, footsteps, and the sound of clanging machinery when no one is nearby. One of the most chilling reports is that of a ghostly engineer who is said to appear near the giant turbines. Some have claimed to see the outline of a man in uniform, while others have heard the distinct sounds of a man calling for help. The swimming pool. The ship's first-class swimming pool is another area known for its eerie atmosphere. The pool, which is no longer in use, has become a hot spot for paranormal activity. Visitors have reported seeing apparitions of women in 1930s bathing suits near the pool area, as well as hearing strange splashing sounds when the pool is empty. Some guests have even reported feeling a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread when they approach the area, as if something sinister is lurking beneath the surface. The first-class cabin. Another haunted location on the Queen Mary is the first-class cabin, where it is believed that a young woman named Jackie met her untimely death. According to the story, Jackie had been traveling with her husband when she had a violent argument with him in the cabin. She was later found dead, allegedly the victim of foul play, although the details surrounding her death remain unclear. Guests who stay in the cabin have reported hearing her faint sobs, feeling a cold presence in the room, and even seeing her ghostly figure near the bed. Jackie's restless spirit is said to haunt this room, still searching for answers to her tragic fate. The salon. The salon is another infamous area on the ship, where a series of ghostly encounters have been reported. Some guests and staff have heard the sounds of piano music, despite the fact that the ship's original piano has long been removed. Others have seen the ghostly figure of a woman in a long, flowing dress, wandering the room as though lost. The haunting presence in the salon is thought to be the spirit of a woman who died on board the ship, possibly due to a fall from the balcony. The mysterious woman is said to be drawn to the beauty of the room, as if she can never leave the space she once adored. There have been countless reports of paranormal activity on the Queen Mary, some of which have been documented by renowned paranormal investigators. Among the most compelling accounts are those of guests who have stayed in the rooms that are said to be the most haunted, such as room B340, which is infamous for its ghostly encounters. Guests in this room have reported hearing knocking on the door, feeling cold drafts, and seeing figures move around the room when no one is present. Staff members, too, have experienced strange phenomena on the ship. Some have reported hearing unexplained sounds, such as the clinking of glasses or the sound of footsteps in the halls. Others have felt sudden, inexplicable cold spots or seen objects move on their own. One staff member even claimed to have seen a full apparition of a man in a naval uniform walking the decks late at night, disappearing into thin air before he could approach him. The Queen Mary's reputation as a haunted vessel has attracted numerous paranormal investigators, some of whom have captured disturbing evidence of supernatural activity. The ship has been featured on several television shows dedicated to the paranormal, including Ghost Adventures, Ghost Hunters, and The Dead Files, which have all recorded strange occurrences and captured eerie footage during their investigations. While many of the ghost stories surrounding the Queen Mary are based on personal accounts and local legends, there is no doubt that the ship has earned its place in the pantheon of haunted locations. The tragic events of the past, coupled with the countless reports of paranormal activity, make it one of the most haunted ships in the world. Today, The Queen Mary stands as a historic landmark, a museum, and a hotel. But for many, it remains much more than a relic of maritime history. It is a living, breathing haunted attraction where the spirits of the past still linger, trapped aboard the ghost ship, unable to rest. Whether it's the crew members who perished during the collision with the Curacao, the souls of those who died under tragic circumstances, or the restless spirits who continue to roam the ship, the Queen Mary is a place where the past and present collide in a spine-chilling dance of the supernatural. If you ever find yourself in Long Beach, be sure to visit the Queen Mary, but beware. The ship's haunting presence may leave you with more than just memories of a great vacation. You might just take home a ghostly encounter that will last a lifetime. Story 9. The Myrtles Plantation, the Ghosts of Louisiana. Nestled amidst the lush greenery of St. Francisville, Louisiana, stands the Myrtles Plantation, a historic mansion shrouded in dark legends and ghostly tales. Known as one of the most haunted locations in the United States, the plantation has earned its eerie reputation due to the tragic events that took place within its walls. The story of the Myrtles Plantation is not only a tale of history, but also one of betrayal, loss, and restless spirits that continue to haunt the estate. The Myrtles Plantation was originally built in 1796 by General David Bradford, a wealthy businessman and former American Revolutionary War soldier. The mansion was constructed on a beautiful piece of land along the Mississippi River, which had previously been home to Native Americans. Bradford named it Laurel Grove, but after his death, it was renamed the Myrtles Plantation, reportedly after the myrtle trees that lined the property. In the early 1800s, the plantation passed into the hands of different owners, with the most prominent and infamous being the Woodruff family. It was during the Woodruff family's tenure that the plantation's darkest chapter began to unfold, giving rise to the haunting legends that still persist today. One of the most well-known and chilling ghost stories associated with the Myrtles Plantation involves a young, enslaved woman named Chloe. Chloe was a servant to the Woodruff family, and according to legend, she was in love with the master of the house, Clark Woodruff. Chloe, desperate to gain his affection, allegedly used her position to spy on the family and overhear private conversations. In one such conversation, Chloe learned that Clark Woodruff planned to dismiss her from her duties as a servant and send her away from the plantation. Fearing her loss of status and livelihood, Chloe decided to take drastic action to win his favor. To earn the trust of the family, Chloe baked a cake and poisoned it with oleander, a highly toxic plant. She intended for only Mrs. Woodruff and her children to eat the cake, hoping to gain Clark's sympathy by saving them from the effects of the poison. However, the plan went terribly wrong. Mrs. Woodruff and her children fell ill, but so did Mr. Woodruff and other members of the family who had unknowingly eaten the poisoned cake. Mrs. Woodruff and one of the children died from the poison, while Clark Woodruff, after realizing the tragedy that had occurred, was devastated. Chloe, in a panic, was blamed for the deaths. In response, she was reportedly hanged by the other enslaved workers and thrown into the river, her body never to be recovered. Chloe's actions and her tragic end set the stage for the plantation's eerie history. It is said that her restless spirit still roams the grounds, seeking revenge for the injustice she faced and the lives she destroyed. The most infamous hauntings at the Myrtles Plantation are said to be the result of Chloe's actions. Many visitors to the plantation claim to have encountered her ghost, often described as a young woman in a green headscarf. She is said to appear in various areas of the plantation, particularly in the grand entrance hall and the mirror in the foyer. According to legend, Chloe's ghost is known to appear with her head tilted slightly to the side, her green scarf tied tightly around her head, and her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and vengeance. However, Chloe is not the only spirit said to haunt the Myrtles Plantation. Over the years, many other ghosts have been reported, each with their own chilling story. Some of the most commonly reported apparitions are those of the Woodruff family themselves, including the ghost of Mrs. Woodruff, who is said to wander the halls in search of her children. Others have claimed to see the spirits of children playing near the mansion, their laughter echoing through the night, only to disappear when approached. One of the most terrifying paranormal phenomena associated with the plantation is the mirror in the entrance hall. The mirror, which was once owned by the Woodruff family, is said to be cursed. Visitors who have dared to look into the mirror often report seeing strange, shadowy figures, or even the faint outlines of human faces. Some claim to have seen the ghostly faces of the Woodruff family or other spirits trapped within the glass. It is believed that the spirits of the dead are trapped in the mirror, unable to move on due to the tragic events that transpired at the plantation. Aside from the apparitions of Chloe and the Woodruffs, there have been numerous reports of unexplained noises and activity at the Myrtles plantation. Visitors and staff alike have reported hearing the sounds of footsteps echoing in empty rooms, doors opening and closing by themselves, and the disembodied sounds of children playing and laughing in the halls. The sounds of furniture being moved around and the creaking of floorboards are also common, despite no one being present to make such noises. In some cases, the ghostly activity seems to be tied to specific rooms. One of the most haunted rooms is the room where Chloe is said to have been hanged. Guests who stay in this room have reported feeling an overwhelming sense of dread, with many experiencing difficulty breathing or being unable to sleep due to the oppressive atmosphere. Some have claimed to see a shadowy figure hanging from the rafters, while others have felt a cold, invisible presence near them. The plantation is also known for its oppressive atmosphere, particularly during the nighttime hours. Those who visit the plantation after dark often report feeling an eerie sense of being watched, as though they are not alone. The feeling of being followed or stalked by unseen forces is common, and many visitors have left the property with an overwhelming sense of unease and fear. Today, the Myrtles plantation operates as a bed and breakfast, offering tours and overnight accommodations for those seeking a more personal experience with the haunted estate. Despite the terror that surrounds the property, it remains a popular tourist attraction, with guests eager to learn about its dark past and perhaps even encounter a spirit of their own. The Myrtles plantation's haunted reputation only grows with each passing year, and paranormal investigators from all over the world visit the site to conduct research and document the activity that takes place within its walls. The ghosts of the Myrtles plantation are not likely to go anywhere anytime soon, and their restless spirits continue to roam the grounds, leaving behind a legacy of terror and tragedy that will never be forgotten. Story 10. The Whaley House. The Whaley House stood like a sentinel in the heart of San Diego's old town, its red brick facade weathered by decades of California sun. It was charming in a way, a piece of history preserved in time, but there was something about it that made Emma Pierce shiver as she approached. Perhaps it was the stories, tales of restless spirits and tragic deaths. Or perhaps it was the house itself, exuding an aura of melancholy that no amount of restoration could erase. Emma had always been fascinated by the paranormal. As a freelance journalist, she'd traveled to haunted locations across the country, chasing whispers of ghosts and documenting encounters with the unexplained. But the Whaley House was different. Named one of the most haunted houses in America, it carried a reputation steeped in sorrow, from its days as a family home to its stint as a courthouse and execution site. She stepped through the heavy oak door into the parlor, her boots echoing on the polished wood floors. The air inside was cooler, carrying a faint scent of aged wood and lavender. A docent greeted her with a smile, but Emma's attention was drawn to a shadow that flickered at the edge of her vision. When she turned, there was nothing there. "They say you can feel the history here," the docent began, leading her into the house's dimly lit interior. The Whaley family suffered many tragedies, and some believe they've never truly left. Emma nodded, her notebook in hand. She'd done her homework. Thomas Whaley had built the house in 1857, and over the years, it had been the site of untimely deaths, including the hanging of Yankee Jim Robinson before the house was constructed. Thomas himself claimed to have heard the condemned man's heavy footsteps echoing through the halls. That night, Emma returned alone. She had secured permission to spend several hours in the house after dark, hoping to capture evidence of the supernatural. Armed with a digital recorder, a thermal camera, and an EMF detector, she set up her equipment in the courtroom on the first floor. The room was eerily silent, the only sound the faint hum of her devices. Hours passed with little activity. Emma moved to the upstairs bedrooms, where she'd read reports of ghostly apparitions. She stood in the nursery, scanning the room with her thermal camera. The rocking chair by the window creaked, and her breath caught. She moved closer, noting the chill that seemed to emanate from the chair. "Is someone here?" she asked, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. The EMF detector spiked, the lights flashing red. Emma held her recorder closer. "Can you tell me your name?" she whispered. A faint, almost imperceptible laugh drifted through the air. Emma's skin prickled. She played back the recording, but heard nothing unusual. Still, the atmosphere in the room had changed, as though unseen eyes were watching her. As the night wore on, Emma ventured into the parlor where Thomas Whaley himself had reportedly been seen, a spectral figure in a frock coat and top hat. She settled into a chair, her recorder running. "Mr. Whaley, are you here?" she asked. The chandelier above her began to sway gently, though there was no draft. Emma stared, her pulse racing. "Is that you?" she pressed. A sudden weight pressed on her chest, and she gasped. The feeling passed as quickly as it had come, leaving her shaken. She reviewed her footage later and saw nothing. No apparition, no shadow, but the recorder picked up a faint whisper. "Leave." Emma left the house as dawn broke, the sky painted in soft shades of pink and orange. She'd experienced enough to know that the stories were more than just local lore. The Whaley house wasn't just a historic landmark. It was a place where the past lingered, its echoes refusing to fade. The tragedies that had unfolded within its walls had left an indelible mark, a reminder that some spirits are tied to this world not by choice, but by sorrow. Story 11. The Greenbrier Ghost. The rolling hills of Greenbrier County, West Virginia, held secrets in their misty embrace. None was more enduring than the tale of Zona Hester Shue, the Greenbrier Ghost. Though nearly a century had passed, whispers of her tragic fate and supernatural testimony lingered in the quiet town of Lewisburg. For the residents, it was more than just a ghost story. It was a legend etched into the fabric of their history. Mary Dunbar, a local historian with a fascination for unsolved mysteries, had spent years collecting accounts of Zona's story. To her, the legend wasn't just a ghost story. It was a reminder of justice sought from beyond the grave. Determined to bring Zona's tale to life for a new generation, Mary set out to retrace the steps of the haunting, piecing together the events that had captivated the town for generations. Zona Hester Shue had been a vibrant young woman when she met Edward Trout Shue, a blacksmith who had recently moved to Greenbrier. Their whirlwind romance ended in a quiet wedding, much to the dismay of Zona's mother, Mary Jane Hester, who distrusted Trout from the moment she laid eyes on him. Zona seemed happy, but Mary Jane's unease grew with every passing day. Something about Trout felt wrong, though she couldn't explain why. Less than a year later, in January 1897, Zona's lifeless body was discovered at the foot of the stairs in the couple's modest home. The scene was strange. Her body was positioned awkwardly, as though someone had tried to move her. A neighbor's young boy, sent on an errand to the house, had found her and run to fetch help. The local doctor, summoned by Trout, found nothing immediately suspicious. Trout's grief seemed genuine, though his insistence on dressing Zona's body in a high-collared gown and scarf struck some as odd. When the doctor declared her death a result of everlasting faint, a vague term for heart failure, Zona was quickly buried, and life in Greenbrier began to move on. But Mary Jane Hester could not. Zona's death gnawed at her like a persistent ache. Her daughter's passing didn't feel natural. It felt forced, deliberate, as though the truth lay hidden beneath layers of deception. Sitting by her fire one cold evening, Mary Jane prayed for answers. She asked for a sign, for some way to know what had really happened to her beloved Zona. That night, as the wind howled outside her modest home, Mary Jane's prayers were answered in a way she never could have anticipated. Zona came to her. Mary Jane described the visitation in vivid detail. Zona's spirit, radiant yet solemn, appeared at the foot of her bed, her presence both comforting and chilling. Her voice was a whisper carried on the wind, soft yet filled with urgency. "Mother, I was murdered," Zona's ghost said, her voice trembling. "Trout broke my neck in a fit of rage. He could not stand my defiance." The apparition lingered, recounting the final moments of Zona's life. She spoke of an argument with Trout, his temper flaring into violence. His hands, cruel and unyielding, had taken her life. To prove her words, the spirit bent her head at an unnatural angle, revealing the fatal injury. Mary Jane awoke with a start, her heart pounding. But the dream returned for 3 more nights, each visitation more vivid than the last. Each time, Zona's plea was the same: seek justice. Armed with the spectral testimony, Mary Jane approached the local prosecutor, John Preston. Though skeptical, Preston couldn't ignore Mary Jane's unwavering conviction. He ordered Zona's body to be exhumed for an autopsy, a decision that sent ripples of gossip through the small community. To everyone's astonishment, the examination revealed that Zona's neck had indeed been broken. The ligaments were torn, and her windpipe was crushed, confirming the story told by the ghost. Trout Shue was arrested and put on trial for murder. The courtroom buzzed with speculation as Mary Jane took the stand, recounting her daughter's visitations. Her testimony was unusual, to say the least, and the judge instructed the jury to disregard supernatural elements. Yet the physical evidence was damning, and Trout's own suspicious behavior, his overbearing control of Zona's funeral arrangements and his violent past, sealed his fate. The jury found him guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Mary Dunbar walked the same path Zona had once traveled, imagining the young woman's joy and despair. She visited Zona's grave, a simple marker beneath a towering oak. Nearby, a historical plaque commemorated the trial, a testament to a mother's love and a ghost's cry for justice. Mary lingered by the gravesite, her fingers tracing the etching of Zona's name. As the sun dipped below the hills, casting the cemetery in hues of gold and shadow, Mary felt a chill sweep through the air. The breeze carried with it the faintest hint of lavender, a scent Mary Jane had often described during her daughter's visitations. She lingered, half expecting to see a flicker of movement among the shadows, but the land remained quiet, as if Zona's spirit had finally found peace. The Greenbrier ghost wasn't just a tale of tragedy. It was a story of resilience, proof that even in death, truth could prevail. For Mary, the story was more than history. It was a reminder that love and justice could transcend even the veil between worlds. Zona's voice, carried on the whispers of the wind, would never be forgotten. Story 12. The Story of Resurrection Mary. Resurrection Mary is one of the most famous and chilling ghost stories in Illinois, and it continues to haunt the imaginations of those who live near Resurrection Cemetery in Justice, a suburb just outside Chicago. Over the years, countless people have reported strange, eerie encounters with a mysterious young woman who appears on the side of the road, dressed in white, her presence shrouded in mystery. But who is she? What is the tragic story behind her apparition? And why has she haunted the area for decades? Today, we delve into the haunting tale of Resurrection Mary, a story that's become as much a part of local lore as the cemetery itself. The tale of Resurrection Mary dates back to the 1930s, though the true origins of the legend are difficult to pin down. The most widely accepted version of the story claims that the ghostly figure is that of a young woman who died tragically long ago, her spirit bound to the place of her death. She is often described as a beautiful blonde-haired woman, wearing a white dress, sometimes a flowing gown, sometimes a simple cocktail dress from the 1920s. Her name, however, has remained a mystery. She has been called Mary by locals, though no one knows for sure whether that was her real name or if it was simply an attempt to personalize her story. The story begins in the early 1930s, when a young woman, often identified as a local teenager, attended a dance at the O. Henry Ballroom, a popular venue located not far from Resurrection Cemetery. The ballroom was the site of many social gatherings, and young men and women would come from all over to dance the night away. One fateful evening, after a heated argument with her date, the young woman stormed out of the ballroom, upset and emotionally distraught. She began walking along Archer Avenue, which runs beside the cemetery, perhaps to clear her mind. Tragically, as she made her way down the road, she was struck by a car, possibly speeding, and killed instantly. Her body was later discovered near the cemetery gates, a stark and violent contrast to the carefree life she had once led. The young woman's death was reported as an accident, and her funeral was held at a local church before she was buried in Resurrection Cemetery, close to where she had met her untimely end. However, her spirit would not rest, and soon after her death, locals began reporting strange sightings near the cemetery. A mysterious young woman in white, seemingly appearing out of nowhere, walking the roads and vanishing before anyone could get close. The first known reports of Resurrection Mary came from local residents in the early 1930s. Drivers along Archer Avenue began to report seeing a young woman in a white dress walking down the street, seemingly without a care in the world. The sightings were sporadic, but one thing was consistent. Whenever someone stopped to offer her a ride, she would vanish without a trace before they could make it anywhere near the cemetery. Some even claimed to see her at the gates of Resurrection Cemetery, where she would appear to wait as if expecting something or someone. These reports grew more frequent, and soon, the legend of Resurrection Mary began to spread. She became a local ghost story, a tale told over campfires and at social gatherings. Though no one could confirm her identity, many believed that she was the ghost of the young woman who had died so tragically so many years ago. And so, the name Resurrection Mary was born. As the years passed, the sightings of Resurrection Mary continued, though the details of her encounters varied. Drivers on Archer Avenue in particular were the most likely to encounter her. The story of a man in the 1970s is one of the most famous and chilling accounts of an encounter with Resurrection Mary. The man who was driving late at night saw the woman standing alone on the side of the road. He stopped and offered her a ride, and she silently climbed into the car. She didn't speak, but he could sense an air of sadness about her. As they neared Resurrection Cemetery, the woman suddenly disappeared right before his eyes, leaving him in a state of shock. The man, confused and alarmed, pulled over and searched the area around the cemetery, but there was no sign of the woman. However, as he walked toward the cemetery gates, he noticed something odd. He came across a gravestone that bore the name of a young woman who had died in a tragic accident years earlier, the same time and place that the woman in the white dress had been last seen. There have been numerous similar accounts over the years. Many drivers have described seeing the woman only to find that she vanishes at the same location near the cemetery. Some claim to have heard a faint, mournful cry before the apparition disappears. Others describe a cold chill that overtakes the car, making the air feel heavy and uncomfortable as they approach the cemetery gates. The mystery of Resurrection Mary has led to various theories, some plausible and others more supernatural in nature. One common explanation is that she is a restless spirit, unable to move on after her untimely death. The idea is that she was never given a proper farewell, and now she is trapped in a kind of limbo, wandering the roads near the place where her life ended. The cemetery itself, which houses many of the area's dead, is thought to serve as her resting place, though she never seems to find peace. Some believe that Resurrection Mary is tied to the O. Henry Ballroom. The ballroom was once a popular spot for dances, and the young woman might have been a regular patron. Some theorize that her spirit is drawn to the place where she experienced joy, only to find that it no longer exists. The building itself was closed in the 1970s and has since been repurposed, but the legend persists, and many believe that her ghost still longs to return to the dance hall. A more eerie theory ties Resurrection Mary to a series of unsolved murders that took place in the area during the 1930s. Some researchers believe that Mary may have been one of the victims of a notorious serial killer who was active in the region at the time. If this were true, then perhaps her ghost was never able to move on because of the brutal and unresolved nature of her death. Today, Resurrection Mary continues to be one of the most famous ghost stories in Illinois. Even though the cemetery is located in a quiet suburban area, the road that runs beside it, Archer Avenue, is still known as one of the most haunted stretches of road in the state. Drivers who pass through the area late at night often report seeing strange lights, hearing eerie sounds, or feeling a sudden drop in temperature, signs that Resurrection Mary's presence is still felt. In recent years, the cemetery itself has become a destination for ghost hunters, paranormal enthusiasts, and curious visitors. Many report experiencing strange occurrences near the cemetery gates, such as cold spots, unexplained noises, and even glimpses of a woman in a white dress. While some dismiss the stories as mere folklore, others remain convinced that Resurrection Mary still roams the streets of justice, waiting for her next encounter. The story of Resurrection Mary remains a fixture of Illinois folklore, a tale that blends tragedy with mystery. Whether she is the restless spirit of a young woman who met a cruel end, or a deeper mystery waiting to be unraveled, the ghostly woman in white continues to haunt the area around Resurrection Cemetery. Her tale serves as a reminder that sometimes the most chilling stories are those that remain unsolved, echoing through time and leaving their mark on history. Though her identity remains uncertain, Resurrection Mary's presence is undeniable. As long as the roads near Resurrection Cemetery exist, so too will the legend of the young woman who died too soon, and the ghostly figure in white who refuses to leave. Story 13. The St. Louis Exorcism. The true story behind The Exorcist. In 1949, in the quiet suburbs of St. Louis, Missouri, a young boy's life would take a dark and terrifying turn, setting the stage for one of the most well-documented exorcism cases in history. The boy, later given the pseudonym Robbie Mannheim, was not the first child to experience possession, nor was he the last. But his case became a focal point for the Catholic Church and for those seeking to understand the terrifying phenomenon of demonic possession. What happened to this boy, and how did he become the central figure in one of the most unsettling and well-known paranormal stories in modern history? Join us as we unravel the chilling tale of the St. Louis exorcism. The story begins in the late 1940s in a small town in Missouri, where Robbie, a 13-year-old boy, lived with his family. Robbie was an ordinary child, enjoying hobbies such as playing with a toy drum and spending time with his family. However, his peaceful life was shattered when he began experimenting with a Ouija board, a device that had become a popular pastime at the time. According to reports, Robbie and his aunt had begun using the board to contact spirits, and it was after one such session that strange occurrences began to unfold. The first signs were subtle, scratching noises emanating from the walls of his room, followed by a strange, unexplained noise like something scraping at the floorboards. At first, Robbie and his family thought it was simply their imagination. However, over time, these occurrences grew more intense. Objects would move around in the room on their own, and the boy began to experience disturbing physical manifestations. His body would jerk violently, and he would complain of feeling a strange, oppressive force around him. His behavior became erratic and unnerving, and the family was increasingly frightened. The family sought help from a series of local doctors and psychiatrists, but nothing could explain the strange behavior. As the weeks passed, Robbie's condition only worsened. He reportedly began speaking in a guttural voice, which was far from his usual tone, and could seemingly communicate in languages he had never learned. He displayed an unnatural aversion to religious symbols, such as crosses, and even reacted violently when he came into contact with holy water. At this point, the family was desperate. The boy's condition was worsening, and none of the medical professionals could explain what was happening. It wasn't until they consulted a Lutheran pastor that the idea of demonic possession was first raised. The pastor suggested that they seek help from the Catholic Church, as exorcisms were part of Catholic ritual and doctrine. The church was initially hesitant to get involved, requiring significant evidence before granting approval for an exorcism. The family's desperation and the increasing severity of the boy's symptoms convinced the church to intervene. After a series of tests and consultations, the church agreed to send 2 Jesuit priests to perform the exorcism. Father Walter Halloran and Father Raymond Bishop were chosen to perform the ritual. They arrived at the family's home in early 1949 and were immediately confronted with a chilling scene. The boy's condition was far worse than anyone had anticipated. He had begun to display supernatural strength, thrashing violently during fits of rage and levitating off his bed. The boy's body would contort in ways that seemed impossible, and the priests were forced to hold him down to prevent him from injuring himself. Over the course of several days, Father Halloran and Father Bishop engaged in the exorcism, chanting prayers and invoking the name of Christ in an attempt to expel the demonic entity from Robbie's body. The process was long and grueling. The boy's condition fluctuated. At times, he seemed to return to a normal state, only to later be overtaken by violent outbursts and strange behaviors. The exorcism itself was fraught with disturbing and inexplicable events. At one point, the boy was reportedly seen levitating above his bed, an occurrence that both frightened and amazed the priests. The room was filled with an air of malevolence, and objects within the room would often be hurled violently across the room without any human contact. The priests, however, were undeterred. The ritual continued, with the boy sometimes slipping into a trance-like state, and at other times, howling in pain and anger. As the days passed, the boy's resistance to the ritual grew stronger. He exhibited strange, otherworldly strength, throwing priests off him or attempting to break free of their grip. Despite the escalating violence, the priests pressed on, determined to drive the demon from the boy's body. One of the most disturbing aspects of the exorcism was the way in which the boy would speak in a voice that was not his own, often in deep, guttural tones. He would also claim to know things about the priests and others present in the room that he could not possibly have known, leading some to believe that the demon inside him had access to knowledge beyond the boy's normal capabilities. As the ritual continued, Father Halloran was struck by a sudden violent force that left him with injuries, and it was then that he knew the situation had escalated beyond anything he had ever encountered. The exorcism stretched on for several weeks, with the priest performing the rituals multiple times a day, trying to break the hold that the demon had on the boy. The exorcism culminated in a dramatic final confrontation. After several days of intense rituals, the demon was finally expelled, and the boy's body was freed. The exact details of how the exorcism ended remain unclear, but witnesses reported that the boy seemed to calm down dramatically, and the disturbing physical manifestations ceased. The family, deeply shaken by the ordeal, never spoke publicly about the event, and the boy, Robbie, was given a new identity to protect him from the media and curious onlookers. It is believed that he recovered from the possession, though details about his life after the exorcism are scarce. What happened to Robbie after the exorcism remains one of the most well-kept secrets surrounding the case. The St. Louis exorcism became the subject of much fascination in the years following the events, with books and articles written about the case. Many argue that it served as the inspiration for the 1971 novel The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty, which was later adapted into the iconic film in 1973. Though the fictionalized version differs in some ways, it shares many elements with the true story of Robbie Mannheim, including the boy's violent behavior, the use of holy water, and the priest's struggles with the demonic force. The case also inspired many to question the nature of demonic possession and the role of the Catholic Church in dealing with such phenomena. While skeptics have pointed to the boy's possible psychological issues as the cause of his strange behavior, others remain convinced that the events were supernatural in nature. The St. Louis exorcism is a chilling and perplexing story that remains one of the most well-known exorcism cases in modern history. Whether one believes in demonic possession or not, the terrifying events that transpired in that small Missouri home continue to haunt those who study the paranormal. For the family of Robbie Mannheim, the exorcism was a desperate attempt to save their loved one from an unimaginable force. And though the boy's life after the event remains largely a mystery, the legend of the St. Louis exorcism lives on as a terrifying reminder of the dark forces that may lurk just beyond our understanding. Story 14. The Skirvin Hotel, a haunting legacy. The Skirvin Hotel in Oklahoma City is notorious not only for its history, but also for its reputation as one of the most haunted hotels in the United States. The hotel's chilling tales of ghosts and paranormal encounters have attracted the attention of those fascinated by the supernatural. The Skirvin Hotel is a place where history, mystery, and horror collide, particularly in the stories surrounding the ghost of a woman who has been said to haunt its halls for decades. Here's a deeper look into the eerie history of the Skirvin Hotel. The Skirvin Hotel is an iconic building in Oklahoma City, known for its elegant architecture and luxurious accommodations. However, it's not just its grandeur that draws people in, it's the terrifying ghost stories that have haunted its halls for years. The hotel's chilling reputation is built around the legend of a woman named Effie, and it is this spectral figure that has earned the Skirvin its place as one of the most haunted locations in the United States. Today, we explore the strange and spooky history behind the Skirvin Hotel, uncovering the tragic events and ghostly encounters that continue to haunt its corridors. The Skirvin Hotel was originally opened in 1911, built by a wealthy businessman named William Balser Skirvin. The 10-story hotel was one of the tallest buildings in Oklahoma City at the time and quickly became a symbol of luxury and sophistication. It catered to wealthy guests, businessmen, and politicians, becoming a fixture of the city's downtown area. The hotel was a hub of activity throughout the early and mid-20th century, with notable figures staying at the hotel, including politicians, athletes, and celebrities. Yet, despite its success and luxury, the Skirvin Hotel also carried a darker, more mysterious history, one tied to the paranormal. The most infamous ghost story connected to the Skirvin Hotel revolves around a woman named Effie. There are various versions of Effie's story, but the most widely accepted version involves a woman who had a romantic relationship with William Skirvin himself. According to the legend, Effie was a young chambermaid who worked at the hotel. Some versions of the tale suggest that she became pregnant by Skirvin, while others claim that she was simply his lover. Regardless, when the relationship became scandalous and threatened to ruin his reputation, Skirvin allegedly had her locked away in one of the hotel's top-floor rooms. It is said that Effie was kept in isolation for the duration of her pregnancy, and that she was never allowed to leave the room. In her despair, Effie reportedly went mad, and it's believed that she died in the hotel, either from complications related to childbirth or by her own hand. However, her story did not end with her death. According to legend, her restless spirit has haunted the hotel ever since. Some say that Effie's ghost can still be heard crying in the halls, while others report seeing her ghostly figure walking the corridors, especially on the top floors where she was confined. The haunting of Effie has become one of the most enduring stories in the hotel's history, adding an eerie, tragic layer to the building's reputation. Over the years, guests and employees of the Skirvin Hotel have reported numerous eerie encounters with the supernatural. One of the most common reports involves the sound of a woman's cries or footsteps echoing through the halls at night. Several guests have claimed to have heard a woman's voice whispering their name, while others have described a sudden, unexplained drop in temperature in certain areas of the hotel. Another frequently reported phenomenon is the appearance of strange shadows and figures in the hotel's mirrors and windows. In many cases, guests have described seeing a tall, dark figure standing behind them in mirrors or in the reflection of the elevator doors, only to turn around and find no one there. There have also been reports of elevator doors opening and closing on their own, and some guests have claimed to feel an invisible force brushing up against them while in their rooms. Perhaps one of the most chilling stories involves the top floors of the hotel, where Effie is said to have been confined. Some guests have reported being unable to sleep due to the unsettling feeling that they were being watched, while others have experienced disturbing, vivid nightmares. One guest even described waking up in the middle of the night to find the bed shaking violently, as if something or someone was trying to disturb them. Employees of the hotel have also witnessed strange occurrences, including the sounds of doors opening and closing by themselves and inexplicable disturbances in the hotel's kitchen, even when no one was present. The haunting has become so well known that the hotel staff is often asked by guests about the stories of Effie, and many believe that her spirit continues to linger in the building. Despite its reputation as a haunted location, the Skirvin Hotel continued to operate throughout the 20th century, even as its haunting stories became more widely known. In the early 2000s, the hotel underwent an extensive renovation to bring it into the modern age, updating its facilities while preserving much of its historic charm. Yet, Despite these renovations, the paranormal activity reportedly persisted, and some even believe that the haunting was intensified during the restoration. The new owners of the Skirvin Hotel embraced its haunted reputation, turning the spooky tales into a part of the hotel's identity. Guests who check in at the Skirvin are often greeted with the ghost stories and eerie rumors surrounding the hotel, and some guests specifically book rooms in the most haunted sections of the building to try and experience the supernatural for themselves. The Skirvin Hotel has since become a popular location for paranormal enthusiasts, with ghost hunters making the hotel a regular stop on their investigations. The hotel has even been featured on several paranormal TV shows, such as Ghost Adventures, where the crew investigated the reported hauntings. The Skirvin Hotel stands as a monument to both Oklahoma City's history and the paranormal. Whether you believe in the supernatural or not, the stories of Effie's ghost and the many other strange encounters at the hotel are undeniable parts of the building's legacy. The combination of its historic significance, the tragic tale of Effie, and the countless eerie reports from both guests and staff have made the Skirvin Hotel a haunted landmark that continues to draw curiosity, fear, and fascination. Effie's story, tragic and haunting, has become an integral part of the hotel's history, ensuring that her spirit will never be forgotten. For those brave enough to visit the Skirvin, they may find themselves not only checking into a historic hotel, but into a place where the past and the restless spirits that inhabit it are always lurking, waiting for their next encounter. Story 15. The Lady in White, New York. The Lady in White is one of the most enduring and chilling ghostly legends, with numerous variations across the United States. In New York, the story of the Lady in White is particularly haunting, often associated with several locations throughout the state. The spirit is said to be that of a woman who died under tragic circumstances, and her ghost roams the streets, highways, or locations where she perished, seeking justice or mourning her lost life. Here's a detailed account of the Lady in White haunting in New York. In the shadowed corners of New York, where old mansions, crumbling cemeteries, and winding roads meet, there exists a haunting story that has captivated the imagination of many. A woman dressed in flowing white who haunts the area where she tragically met her end. Known simply as the Lady in White, her ghostly figure has appeared in countless stories, a specter of sorrow, lost love, and untold tragedy. But who is the Lady in White in New York, and why does she continue to wander the land, shrouded in her spectral gown? The Lady in White is a phenomenon that stretches beyond New York, with variations of her legend appearing across the United States. But in the Empire State, the story carries a special weight, one tied to real locations, heart-wrenching stories, and encounters that have been passed down for generations. The first known accounts of the Lady in White in New York State typically involve a young woman who experienced a tragic fate, often love lost, an untimely death, or betrayal. Some versions of the story tell of a bride-to-be who was jilted at the altar, or a woman who was murdered by a lover or spouse. In almost every version, the woman is seen wearing a white gown, symbolizing purity and innocence, now marred by the tragic end she suffered. One of the most famous versions of the Lady in White legend is linked to a road called the New York State Route 23, also known as the Ghost Road. According to legend, a woman who was once a bride-to-be was murdered on the road after a lover's quarrel went horribly wrong. Some say that she died before she could ever marry, and her spirit now roams the route, seeking peace. In one of the most enduring versions of the Lady in White in New York, the spirit is said to be a woman named Eleanor, a young bride who had just been wed in a grand ceremony. On her wedding night, her husband, an unfaithful man, left her alone, and in a fit of rage and jealousy, he drove her to an isolated bridge. There, in an act of brutality, he murdered her before disappearing into the night. Eleanor's body was found a day later, her wedding gown stained with blood. Her ghost, said to be trapped in her wedding dress, has been seen walking along the bridge, as if forever waiting for the love that was taken from her. Witnesses claim to have seen her spectral figure, often bathed in moonlight, staring mournfully at the place where her life was taken. This tragic version of the Lady in White is not confined to one location. but rather to the haunted roads and bridges of New York. In the quiet of night, she can allegedly be seen in the rearview mirror of passing cars, appearing and vanishing in the blink of an eye. Drivers who have claimed to see her say that they are overwhelmed by an eerie sense of sadness and loss as they pass through her presence, often feeling as if they are being watched by a sorrowful spirit. Another well-known version of the Lady in White is tied to the Finger Lakes region of New York, particularly around the shores of Canandaigua Lake. Here, the Lady in White is said to be the ghost of a woman who drowned in the lake during the 19th century. According to local legend, she was the daughter of a wealthy family who, after becoming engaged to a man from a lower social class, was disowned by her family. The heartbreak and sorrow she felt at losing both her family and her true love led her to walk into the lake, where she drowned herself. Today, the Lady in White is said to haunt the shores of Canandaigua Lake, where visitors have reported seeing a misty figure walking along the water's edge in the early morning or late evening. Sometimes, the Lady in White is seen gazing into the lake as though searching for something, or someone forever lost. Some who have ventured near the lake at night have claimed to hear soft weeping or the distant sound of a woman's voice crying out in despair. There are even stories of boaters who have seen the figure of a woman in a flowing white gown standing on the shore, only for her to vanish without a trace when they approach. One of the most notable places associated with the Lady in White in New York is the Old Croton Aqueduct, located just outside of New York City. Built in the 19th century, this aqueduct was once a critical source of water for the city, but now it serves as a scenic walking trail. However, it's also known for its connection to the legend of the Lady in White. Local lore claims that a woman who lived near the aqueduct lost her beloved fiancé during a construction accident at the aqueduct site. Her grief was so deep that she wandered the trails of the aqueduct for years, searching for the man she lost. Eventually, she succumbed to her grief and died of a broken heart, and her ghost is said to haunt the aqueduct to this day. Visitors to the aqueduct trail have reported seeing the pale figure of a woman dressed in white, slowly moving along the path. Others have heard the soft sound of footsteps behind them or felt an overwhelming presence, as if they are being followed. The eerie encounters often take place at dusk, when the light begins to fade, adding to the unsettling atmosphere of the place. The Lady in White continues to haunt various locations across New York, with numerous sightings reported by locals, visitors, and even paranormal investigators. Common descriptions of her include a woman in a flowing white gown, often with long, dark hair, her face obscured by a veil or the shadow of her grief. Many people who have encountered the Lady in White say that she exudes an air of sadness and sorrow. Witnesses often describe feelings of deep melancholy or being overwhelmed by the weight of her tragic past. Some claim to hear her whispering their name or calling out in a mournful voice, as if pleading for help or companionship. Perhaps the most chilling encounters with the Lady in White are those where her presence seems to linger long after the encounter has ended. Some who have experienced her ghostly apparition report feeling that they are being followed or that her eyes are still upon them long after they've left the haunted site. The Lady in White is a ghostly figure whose presence looms large in New York's folklore and paranormal history. Her story, one of heartbreak, betrayal, and loss, resonates with those who hear it, drawing them into the mystery of her restless spirit. Whether seen on lonely roads, by mist-covered lakes, or along old aqueducts, the Lady in White continues to haunt New York, a tragic reminder of love lost, lives cut short, and the specters that may never find peace. Her mournful figure, draped in white, remains a symbol of sorrow, a ghostly presence who walks forever in search of the love she lost, a love that can never be found again. Story 16. The Gray Man of Pawleys Island, South Carolina. The Gray Man of Pawleys Island is one of South Carolina's most enduring and eerie ghost stories. Known as the spirit of a tragic sailor, the Gray Man is said to appear before hurricanes or other natural disasters, offering a warning of impending danger. The legend has been passed down through generations, becoming a staple of local folklore and sparking curiosity in those interested in the paranormal. Here's a detailed exploration of the haunting tale of the Gray Man of Pawleys Island. Pawleys Island, a small and serene barrier island off the coast of South Carolina, is known for its picturesque beauty, sandy beaches, and historic charm. However, it is also home to one of the state's most chilling ghost stories, the tale of the Gray Man. For centuries, the spirit of this mysterious figure has appeared to warn residents of the island of impending hurricanes, providing a strange and ominous presence in the face of nature's fury. Who is the Gray Man, and why does he return to Pawleys Island every time disaster looms? The legend of the Gray Man is one that has captured the imaginations of both locals and visitors alike, with sightings still occurring to this day. The most widely accepted version of the Gray Man's origin is rooted in the tragic tale of a young sailor who was lost at sea during the 19th century. According to the legend, the Gray Man was a local man who had fallen in love with a woman on Pawleys Island. The two were engaged, and he promised to return to her after a voyage. Unfortunately, during one of his sea journeys, a storm claimed his ship, and he perished in the waters. Heartbroken, the woman waited for her lover's return, but he never came. The years passed, and she eventually married another man, although her love for the sailor was never truly forgotten. As the story goes, years later, a devastating storm was approaching Pawleys Island, one of the many hurricanes that had historically battered the area. The woman, now a widow, was standing on the porch of her house when she saw a man walking toward her in the distance. The man was dressed in a long gray coat, his face obscured by the mist of the storm. Despite the ominous weather, the figure seemed calm, and his steps were purposeful. As he neared the house, the woman recognized him. It was the sailor her long-lost love returned to her. But before she could speak to him, the figure vanished into the fog. Moments later, the storm hit, and the woman's house was spared the worst of the damage, unlike many of the surrounding homes. The woman believed that the Gray Man had come to warn her and the island of the coming storm, saving the lives of many residents by providing them with the knowledge to evacuate or prepare in time. Since that first sighting, the Gray Man has been seen by numerous other people, usually in the days or hours leading up to hurricanes or severe storms. The ghostly figure is often described as being a tall man, dressed in a gray coat or cloak, his face hidden by a fog or mist. He typically appears near the beach or along the roads leading into the island, silently walking in the direction of the houses or in front of those who are traveling toward the island. Witnesses report that the Gray Man does not speak, but his presence is unmistakable. His appearance is often accompanied by a sense of foreboding, as if something important is about to happen. In many accounts, the figure is seen walking in the direction of the home or location that is about to be spared from the storm, while other areas are not so fortunate. One of the most famous sightings occurred before Hurricane Hugo in 1989. Residents of Pawleys Island and nearby areas reported seeing the Gray Man just before the storm made landfall. The island itself experienced relatively little damage compared to neighboring towns, leading many to believe that the appearance of the Gray Man had once again served as a warning. In addition to hurricanes, some reports suggest that the Gray Man has appeared before other types of natural disasters, such as tornadoes or severe thunderstorms, further cementing his reputation as a harbinger of impending danger. The Gray Man is often described as a spectral figure, his clothes old-fashioned and worn, as if he were a sailor or a man from a bygone era. His coat or cloak is typically gray, blending into the mist or fog that often accompanies his sightings. His face is usually obscured by the mist or hidden under the brim of a hat, adding to the air of mystery and making him appear ghostly and intangible. Some witnesses have claimed to see his eyes, which are often described as being hollow or full of sorrow. His steps are said to be slow and deliberate, as if he is walking with purpose, but also with a sense of calmness and inevitability. Despite his eerie appearance, those who have seen the Gray Man report feeling an overwhelming sense of peace or protection in his presence, as if he is there to guide them to safety. Over the years, the legend of the Gray Man has become an integral part of Pawleys Island's history and culture. To this day, many locals believe that the Gray Man is more than just a ghost. He is a protector, a spirit who watches over the island and its residents, offering them a warning when disaster is imminent. The Gray Man's appearances are often seen as a form of divine intervention, a sign that the island's people are being watched over by a higher power. His sightings serve as a reminder of the fragility of life and the power of nature, as well as the importance of heeding warnings when they are given. For many, the Gray Man's spirit represents the island's resilience, a symbol of both loss and protection. While the Gray Man's legend is rooted in the past, sightings of him continue into the present day. Modern residents of Pawleys Island still report seeing the ghostly figure before major storms, and his legacy continues to be passed down through local families. The Gray Man has become a part of the island's identity, with tourists and paranormal enthusiasts often seeking to catch a glimpse of the ghostly figure. Some people visit the island specifically to see the Gray Man, hoping to witness the mysterious figure before a storm. Though sightings are rare and often brief, the legend persists, and the Gray Man remains a fixture of Pawleys Island folklore. The Gray Man of Pawleys Island is a ghostly figure whose tragic past and mysterious presence have captivated the hearts and imaginations of generations. As a protector and harbinger of storms, his spirit continues to watch over the island, offering a warning to those who are paying attention. Whether as a tragic sailor or a timeless guardian, the Gray Man is a reminder of both the fragility of life and the power of nature. For those who live on or visit Pawleys Island, the Gray Man is more than just a ghost. He is a legend that has shaped the island's history and continues to haunt its shores, ensuring that the island's residents are never caught unprepared when disaster strikes. Story 17, the Axeman of New Orleans, Louisiana. The Axeman of New Orleans is one of the most infamous and mysterious figures in the city's criminal history, known for a series of brutal murders that terrified the city in the early 20th century. His identity remains unknown, and the brutal nature of his crimes, combined with a series of strange, taunting letters, has made his story a chilling chapter in New Orleans' darker lore. Here's an in-depth look at the Axeman of New Orleans. In the early 20th century, a wave of fear gripped the city of New Orleans, Louisiana. Between 1918 and 1919, a series of brutal attacks by an unknown assailant, later dubbed the Axeman, terrorized the city. The killer's method of attack was shockingly simple, yet horrifying. He would enter the homes of his victims, often in the dead of night, and bludgeon them with an axe. But it wasn't just the violence of the crimes that haunted New Orleans. It was the bizarre and taunting nature of the killer, who, in one of the most disturbing elements of the case, sent cryptic letters to the press, boasting about his crimes and even suggesting that his victims had been chosen at random. The story of the Axeman remains one of New Orleans' most haunting mysteries, with unanswered questions surrounding the killer's identity, motives, and ultimate fate. Was the Axeman simply a cold-blooded killer, or was there something more sinister at play? The Axeman's reign of terror began on May 22, 1918, when a couple, Joseph and Catherine Maggio, were brutally murdered in their home in the Irish Channel neighborhood of New Orleans. The Maggios were hacked to death with an axe while they slept in their bed. The murderer had broken into their home by chiseling away at the back door, using an axe that was already present in the house. The Maggios' murder was horrifying, but it wasn't until the next attack that the city began to realize they were dealing with something much more sinister. Over the next year, the killer struck multiple times, often targeting Italian-American families. The victims were typically bludgeoned with an axe or a similar blunt instrument while they slept. The attacker was unusually careful, often leaving no trace of his identity or clues behind. Even more chilling, the killer would sometimes cover his victims with sheets after the attacks, adding to the sense of terror and mystery. One of the most disturbing aspects of the Axeman case were the letters he sent to local newspapers, taunting the police and the people of New Orleans. The letters were filled with cryptic messages and demands that seemed to mock the city's inability to catch him. In one infamous letter, the Axeman claimed to be a demon and made a chilling promise to kill again. He also declared that he would spare the lives of anyone who played jazz music on a specific night, saying, "I am very fond of jazz music, and if anyone plays jazz in their homes, I will spare them." The letter, published in the New Orleans Times-Picayune on March 13, 1919, sent shockwaves through the city. Jazz music was immensely popular at the time, and many citizens feared that they could be the next victims. Some businesses even began offering free jazz performances, hoping to appease the killer and keep their customers safe. The Axeman's bizarre request only heightened the sense of dread and confusion surrounding his motives. The Axeman's attacks were brutal and often followed a disturbing pattern. His victims were usually middle-class Italian-American families living in the poorer neighborhoods of New Orleans. The killer would enter through the back door or an unlocked window, using an axe to bludgeon his victims while they slept. Most victims were women and children, though there were several men among the dead. The attacks were swift and violent, leaving little chance for the victims to defend themselves. The victims included the Maggio family, who were the first to be attacked, as well as the Cortimiglia family, who were targeted in June of 1918. The daughter, who was the only survivor, later identified the Axeman's axe. The most notorious attack took place on August 5, 1919, when the Axeman struck the house of a man named Steve Boca. He murdered both Steve and his wife, and despite a large bloodbath, there was still no clear motive or clue as to the killer's identity. The last known attack attributed to the Axeman occurred in October 1919, when the killer murdered a couple, Paul and Mary Toscano. After that, the attacks abruptly stopped. Despite extensive investigations, the Axeman's true identity has never been definitively determined. Numerous suspects have been considered over the years, but none have been conclusively linked to the crimes. Some believe that the killer was an Italian immigrant with a vendetta against the Italian-American community. Others speculate that the Axeman may have been someone with knowledge of the city's criminal underworld, possibly involved in organized crime. The fact that many of the victims were Italian Americans and the killer appeared to target them specifically has led to theories that the murders were a form of ethnic revenge. Another theory is that the Axeman was a serial killer who targeted random victims, rather than having a specific group in mind. The killer's pattern of entering homes at night, using an axe or similar weapon, and leaving the scene with no trace of his identity fits the profile of many serial killers who go undetected for years. There were also rumors that the Axeman was connected to the occult, and that his murders were part of a larger ritualistic pattern. These rumors only fueled the fear and paranoia that gripped New Orleans during the height of the Axeman's reign. The Axeman's killing spree mysteriously stopped as abruptly as it had begun. Theories as to why the murders ended vary, but there are several factors that may explain the abrupt end. One possible explanation is that the killer was killed or imprisoned for a crime unrelated to the Axeman murders. Others suggest that the killer may have simply moved on to another city or changed his methods of killing, making it harder for authorities to link the murders to the Axeman case. Despite several suspects being arrested and investigated, including a man named Joseph Joe Sereno, the Axeman's identity remained a mystery. The taunting letters and gruesome murders left an indelible mark on the city of New Orleans, and the legend of the Axeman continues to captivate the imagination of those interested in true crime and the supernatural. The Axeman of New Orleans is a figure that has remained part of the city's history for over a century. His reign of terror in 1918 to 1919 left the city gripped with fear and wondering if the killer was still lurking among them. The cryptic letters, the brutal murders, and the unexplained silence that followed all contribute to the mystery surrounding his identity. Whether the Axeman was a cold-blooded killer or something more sinister, his story remains one of the most chilling and enigmatic in the annals of true crime. To this day, the legend of the Axeman endures, with his unsolved crimes and eerie letters continuing to fascinate people who study the darker side of human nature. For the people of New Orleans, the Axeman is not just a criminal, but a symbol of the fear and mystery that can still linger in the shadows of history. Story 18. The Haunting of Waverly Hills Sanatorium, a tale of death and shadows. It was a cool autumn evening when I first set my eyes on the looming structure. Nestled atop a hill on the outskirts of Louisville, Kentucky, Waverly Hills Sanatorium stood like a silent sentinel, watching over the city from its eerie perch. Though the sun had long since set, casting long shadows across the hill, I could still make out the crumbling stonework of the massive building, its broken windows like empty eyes staring out into the darkness. There was something haunting about it, something that sent a shiver down my spine even from a distance. Little did I know that stepping foot inside would thrust me into a tale of death, disease, and restless spirits that would haunt me for years to come. The story of Waverly Hills begins long before I ever arrived, in the early 20th century, when tuberculosis, or TB, was sweeping across America like an unstoppable plague. Louisville, Kentucky, was one of the hardest-hit cities, and in response to the overwhelming number of TB patients, the Waverly Hills Sanatorium was built in 1910. The massive building was designed to provide a sanctuary for those suffering from the deadly disease. But what it became, through no fault of the doctors or nurses, was something far darker. It became a tomb. At its peak, Waverly Hills Sanatorium could accommodate over 400 patients, all of them isolated from the outside world in a desperate attempt to prevent the spread of tuberculosis. The building's design, with wide open spaces and high ceilings, was intended to provide fresh air and natural sunlight to aid in the patient's recovery. The idea was that the more oxygen and fresh air the patients received, the better their chances of surviving the disease. But the treatment methods available in those days were far from effective. In fact, many patients faced treatments that were as horrifying as the disease itself. Surgical procedures that removed sections of their infected lungs or even entire ribs in the hope of improving their chances. For most, however, the disease was a death sentence. In the end, it didn't matter how many lungs were removed or how much fresh air the patients breathed. The tuberculosis took its toll, and death became a regular visitor at Waverly Hills. Over the years, thousands of patients died within the walls of that gloomy sanatorium. Their suffering and death were as much a part of the building as its stone foundation. But what set Waverly Hills apart from other hospitals of the time was the chilling rumor that began to circulate. The dead didn't leave. For the most part, the deaths went unnoticed by the other patients. This was due to the secret tunnel that was constructed beneath the sanatorium, known today as the body chute. The chute, a long, dark tunnel stretching 500 feet, was used to discreetly remove the bodies of deceased patients. The idea was that other patients should not see the bodies, lest the sight of death further dampen their spirits. Instead, the bodies were taken out of the building at night, down the steep hill to waiting hearse carts, often without a word to those still battling the disease inside. But while the bodies were taken away, the souls of the departed seemed to linger. The first time I stepped inside Waverly Hills, I could feel it, the weight of history pressing down on me. The air was heavy, thick with the stories of all those who had passed through the sanatorium's doors, seeking relief from a disease that claimed so many lives. The building seemed to sigh, as if it were alive, holding its breath. The creaking of old wood floors beneath my feet sounded strangely like whispers, though no one was there to speak. I had heard the stories about Waverly Hills, stories of shadowy figures seen in the corner of one's eye, of strange cold spots in otherwise warm rooms, and of voices that came from nowhere. But nothing prepared me for the feeling of being watched. The first floor was dimly lit by the flickering light of a few old bulbs, but despite the lights, there were parts of the room where the shadows were deeper, darker, and thicker than the rest of the space. In one of the hallways, I saw it, the fleeting glimpse of a figure dressed in what looked like early 20th century hospital attire. It wasn't a person, but an impression, like the trace of a long-departed soul who had never left. I turned to look, but it was gone, leaving only the lingering feeling that I wasn't alone. The sound of footsteps behind me seemed to echo in the stillness, though no one was visible. As I moved deeper into the building, I couldn't shake the feeling that the sanatorium was alive with memories. Memories of the suffering, the fear, and the countless souls who had been trapped within these walls. The walls themselves seemed to speak, their silent voices carrying the weight of untold stories. It was then that I learned just how alive the building truly was, or rather, how dead it was. We eventually descended into the infamous body chute, a narrow, dark tunnel that had once been used to transport the dead. The air in the tunnel was stifling, and the walls seemed to close in on me. The further I walked, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, as though the very ground beneath my feet was haunted by the remnants of the souls who had passed through this passage in the dark of night. The temperature dropped sharply, and my breath became visible in the cold air, though there were no windows to let in the chill. Some say that the spirits of those who died in the sanatorium still walk this passage, and as I stood there, I could almost feel them brushing past me. The tunnel, despite being empty, seemed full of unseen presence, shadowy figures that I could not see but knew were watching. It wasn't the first time I had felt such a sensation at Waverly Hills, but in that moment, it was overwhelming. I could almost hear the faint whispers of the departed, soft voices that seemed to come from the walls, from the floor, from everywhere. They weren't angry voices. They weren't violent, but they were restless, lost, still trying to make sense of the suffering they had endured in life and death. It is said that the spirits of Waverly Hills are not the only things that linger. There are reports of shadowy figures moving through the halls, figures that vanish when you turn to look, as if they were never there at all. People speak of cold spots, strange drafts, and the feeling of being touched by unseen hands. And then, there are the voices, the disembodied whispers and cries for help that echo through the hallways at night. Some visitors claim to have encountered the Laughing Lady, a spectral woman whose eerie laughter fills the air. Others speak of the figure of a nurse, seen standing in the windows, watching silently as visitors approach. And still, others speak of a man, perhaps a patient, perhaps someone else, who roams the halls, his footsteps echoing in the silence. By the time I left Waverly Hills, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had left something behind, something that had followed me out. The spirits of the past seemed to linger in the corners of my mind, and the chill in the air seemed to remain, even as I drove away. I knew that Waverly Hills was not just a building. It was a place where the living and the dead were inextricably linked. The souls of the lost still walked its hallways, their stories still waiting to be told. Waverly Hills Sanatorium is a place that holds its secrets tightly, secrets that no amount of time or decay can erase. Whether you believe in the supernatural or not, one thing is certain. The ghosts of Waverly Hills are not bound by time. They are not bound by the walls of the sanatorium, and they are not bound by death. They are waiting, still waiting, for those who dare to listen. Story 19, The Jersey Devil, New Jersey. The story of the Jersey Devil begins in the heart of New Jersey's Pine Barrens, a vast and mysterious wilderness stretching across more than 1 million acres. The Pine Barrens are thick with dense forests, winding rivers, and a quiet, unsettling stillness that often leaves visitors with the feeling that something unseen is always watching. It's in this shadowy, swampy expanse that one of the most famous and enduring legends of the American folklore was born. The tale of the Jersey Devil. The legend of the Jersey Devil dates back to the early 18th century, with the most popular version of the story rooted in the life of Mother Leeds, a woman living in the Pine Barrens. According to local lore, Mother Leeds had already given birth to 12 children when she found out she was pregnant with a 13th. Already exhausted and overwhelmed by her large family, she cursed the unborn child, declaring that it would be the devil's own. When the time came for her to give birth, Mother Leeds went into labor at her home in the Pine Barrens. In some versions of the story, she was attended by a midwife. In others, she was alone. As the tale goes, when the baby was born, it was not like any child she had ever seen. The creature, with the head of a goat, the body of a creature, and bat-like wings, immediately let out a shrill, eerie cry. The newborn, instead of being a typical infant, began to grow and transform into a monstrous creature right before their eyes. In an instant, it sprouted wings and clawed feet. With a terrifying screech, it fled the room, breaking through the walls and flying out into the dark Pine Barrens night, never to be seen again. According to the legend, the creature quickly made the forests its home, growing into the terrifying beast known as the Jersey Devil. The Jersey Devil is typically described as a grotesque, winged creature, around 3 to 4 feet tall, with a head resembling that of a goat or horse. Its face is often said to be monstrous, with glowing red eyes, sharp horns protruding from its skull, and a long, snake-like tail. Its body is often depicted as a combination of various animal parts, including bat-like wings, clawed feet, and sometimes the body of a kangaroo or a horse. Witnesses who claim to have encountered the Jersey Devil often describe hearing its chilling screeches echoing through the woods, while others speak of the creature's terrifying and sudden flight through the dark sky, its wings beating loudly in the stillness of the Pine Barrens night. The Pine Barrens, with its eerie, desolate terrain, has long been the perfect backdrop for the legend of the Jersey Devil. For centuries, locals have claimed that the creature still roams these dense forests and swamps. The tales of strange noises, cattle mutilations, and inexplicable sightings have contributed to its terrifying reputation. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, the Jersey Devil was said to be responsible for strange occurrences and sightings throughout southern New Jersey. Farmers would claim that their cattle had been slaughtered in brutal and inexplicable ways, with hoof prints found in the snow leading to nowhere. People would hear strange screeches late at night, echoing through the dark forests, followed by sounds of wings flapping overhead. The creature was particularly infamous for its attacks on livestock, with reports of chickens, goats, and even horses mysteriously found dead with signs of having been mutilated. Local legends tell of a creature that would descend from the woods to attack the farmsteads, terrorizing the residents who dared to live on the outskirts of the Pine Barrens. Many who lived in the area would lock their doors at night, frightened that the devil would come for them next. The myth of the Jersey Devil took hold in the region, and over the years, it became an integral part of the local folklore. Those who lived near the Pine Barrens would exchange tales of sightings and encounters, each more terrifying than the last. Some even claimed to have seen the creature with their own eyes, its bat-like wings flapping furiously as it flew across the darkened sky. While the Jersey Devil had been a subject of local legend for over a century, it wasn't until 1909 that the creature gained national attention. That year, reports of sightings reached a fever pitch, sparking widespread panic in New Jersey. Newspapers began to publish stories of people encountering the Jersey Devil in the woods, and many reported hearing the same haunting screams. Schools were shut down, and people stayed indoors for fear of the creature. In one instance, a police officer claimed to have seen the Jersey Devil flying over a farm in the region, and several other officers reported similar encounters. The sightings came from all over southern New Jersey, and each account seemed more chilling than the last. The media frenzy surrounding the creature escalated quickly. People traveled from all over the country to try to catch a glimpse of the legendary monster. Some took to the skies in airplanes, hoping to spot the creature from above, while others organized groups to venture into the Pine Barrens in search of the beast. For weeks, the Jersey Devil was the talk of the nation, with many wondering if it was real, or if it was simply an elaborate hoax. Despite the efforts of law enforcement and curious adventurers, the Jersey Devil was never captured, and the sightings gradually slowed. But the creature's legend never disappeared. It became ingrained in the culture of southern New Jersey, its dark presence still a topic of conversation during late-night gatherings and storytelling sessions. Even today, the legend of the Jersey Devil persists, and the creature is still the subject of countless reports and stories from those who live in or visit the Pine Barrens. Some claim to have seen the beast soaring through the trees or heard its eerie cry on the wind. While many dismiss these sightings as exaggerations, hoaxes, or misidentifications of other creatures, others swear that the Jersey Devil is real and that it still roams the forests of southern New Jersey, just as it has for centuries. One of the most notable modern sightings occurred in the 1990s, when a group of teenagers claimed to have encountered the Jersey Devil while hiking in the Pine Barrens. The teens reported hearing strange noises and seeing a large winged creature fly over them, disappearing into the trees. Though their accounts were met with skepticism, they remain adamant about what they saw. Locals still report hearing unexplained noises in the woods, screeches that echo through the trees, sometimes in the dead of night. Others say they have seen a shadowy figure with glowing red eyes darting through the forest, vanishing before they could get a good look. The Jersey Devil remains a popular figure in New Jersey folklore, often appearing in books, films, and even as the mascot of the New Jersey Devils hockey team. The Pine Barrens, still a vast and mysterious wilderness, continue to be home to the legend, and the story of the Jersey Devil is passed down through generations. The Jersey Devil is a creature that has haunted the imagination of New Jersey residents for centuries. Whether it's the terrifying screeches that pierce the night air or the shadowy figure flying through the trees, the creature has become an enduring part of local folklore. Its origins are steeped in mystery, and despite many efforts to debunk the tales, the legend lives on. For those brave enough to venture into the Pine Barrens, the legend of the Jersey Devil still lingers, just waiting for the next encounter. Some say that if you listen carefully enough, you might hear its eerie cry in the distance, an unsettling reminder that the devil still roams the woods, just beyond the reach of the living. Story 20. The Goat Man of Maryland. Deep in the forests of Maryland, there is a legend that has haunted the state for generations. A creature whose unsettling presence has been felt by countless souls who dared to enter the woods after dark. Known as the Goat Man, this cryptid is said to stalk the forests of Prince George's County, and its story has been passed down through the years, growing darker with each telling. The tale of the Goat Man is one of mystery, fear, and a creature whose twisted form and malevolent intentions leave a chilling mark on all who encounter it. The story of the Goat Man begins in the rural woodlands of Maryland, near the Patuxent River. Though its legend has evolved over time, the earliest accounts of the creature date back to the mid-20th century. Some claim that the Goat Man was once a man, a scientist working at a government research facility in the area. According to this version of the story, the man was conducting experiments on animal genetics, attempting to crossbreed various species. One of his experiments, however, went horribly wrong, and the result was a terrifying hybrid, a creature with the body of a man, the horns and hooves of a goat, and the ferocity of an animal driven by madness. The experiment failed, and the scientist, horrified by his creation, was either killed by the creature or transformed into it. The creature, now known as the Goat Man, fled into the woods, where it has roamed ever since. Other versions of the story attribute the Goatman's origins to Native American folklore. Some claim that the creature is the spirit of a vengeful shaman who was cursed by his tribe for his dark magic. The curse turned him into a monstrous being, half man, half goat, forever condemned to wander the forests of Maryland, seeking revenge on those who trespass on his domain. Whatever the origins, the Goat Man quickly became one of Maryland's most infamous and terrifying legends, and stories of the creature's attacks began to surface throughout the region. The Goatman's reputation is built on the countless sightings and disturbing encounters reported by those who have dared to venture into the woods. The creature is said to be a bipedal, humanoid figure with the head of a goat, complete with sharp horns and glowing eyes. Its body is muscular, covered in matted fur, and it is often described as standing over 7 feet tall, looming over its prey with a menacing presence. Its hooves make an unmistakable sound as it moves through the woods, and the eerie calls it makes are said to echo through the trees, sending chills down the spines of anyone who hears them. One of the most chilling aspects of the Goat Man is its reported behavior. It is said to be highly aggressive, often attacking those who venture too close to its territory. The creature has been blamed for mutilating livestock, leaving behind carcasses that have been drained of blood or savagely torn apart. In some cases, witnesses claim to have found the bodies of animals that have been gruesomely dismembered, their heads and limbs twisted in unnatural positions, as if the Goat Man is sending a message to anyone who dares to enter its domain. In one infamous case, a group of teenagers went camping in the woods near the Patuxent River, unaware of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. As night fell, they reported hearing strange noises, snapping twigs, heavy breathing, and the unmistakable sound of hooves trampling the forest floor. Suddenly, the creature appeared before them, a massive figure with glowing eyes and sharp horns, standing tall in the moonlight. The teenagers fled in terror, but not before hearing the creature's unsettling roar, echoing through the trees as it gave chase. Though they eventually escaped, the memory of that night would haunt them for the rest of their lives. For many years, the Goatman's domain was said to be centered around the woods of Prince George's County, particularly near the town of Bowie, Maryland. The creature is believed to haunt a number of wooded areas, including the Fletchertown Road, the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center, and the remote, swampy sections of the Patuxent River. The region itself is steeped in mystery, with dense woods that seem to swallow up the light, leaving the trees dark and oppressive. The air in the forest feels different, thick, heavy, as though something unseen is watching, waiting. Those who venture too far into the woods often report a feeling of being followed, as if eyes are upon them from every shadow. The sound of hooves echoing through the forest, the smell of decay, and the sudden cold spots in the air all contribute to the unsettling atmosphere of the area. Some hikers have reported strange occurrences, bizarre, unexplained phenomena such as rocks being thrown at them from unseen hands, or the feeling of something brushing against them in the dark. One of the most common reports is the sense of being pursued, though no one can ever seem to catch a glimpse of what is following them. In the silence of the woods, the whispers of the goatman's presence seem to be felt rather than heard. Perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the goat-man is its ability to appear and disappear seemingly at will. Many who have encountered the creature describe a fleeting glimpse of it in the distance, an enormous figure standing at the edge of the trees, watching silently as they approach. But when they turn away for even a moment, the creature is gone, vanishing into the shadows as if it never existed. Others have described hearing the creature's eerie calls late at night, when the woods are at their quietest. The screeching, guttural sound is said to be a mix between the bleating of a goat and the howling of some otherworldly beast. The sound sends shivers down the spine, and those who have heard it claim to feel an overwhelming sense of dread, like something wicked is coming for them. Despite numerous investigations and attempts to debunk the myth, the goatman continues to be a source of terror for those who live in and around the Maryland woods. Every year, new sightings and encounters are reported, though none have been proven to be authentic. Some believe that the goatman is merely a myth, an urban legend that has grown over time, fueled by fear and imagination. Others, however, insist that the creature is very real and that it continues to roam the forests of Maryland, waiting for its next victim. In addition to its status as a local legend, the goatman has become a popular figure in modern culture. The creature has appeared in books, films, and documentaries, and is often featured in the paranormal circuit as one of the most frightening cryptids in the United States. But for those who have seen it or felt its presence, the goatman is no mere myth. It is a living nightmare, one that continues to haunt the woods of Maryland, and whose twisted form is never far from the edge of their minds. The goatman of Maryland is a creature that has captured the imagination of many, with its terrifying appearance, aggressive nature, and eerie presence in the woods. Whether it is a product of folklore, a mutated beast, or something darker still, the creature remains an enigma, its origins shrouded in mystery. What is certain is that the goatman continues to haunt the forests of Maryland, stalking the shadows and waiting for those brave or foolish enough to venture too far into its domain. For those who dare to visit the woods, the goatman serves as a chilling reminder. There are things out there that should not be disturbed, and some legends are better left untouched. Story 21. The Sallie House, Kansas. In the quiet town of Atchison, Kansas, tucked away in the heart of the Midwest, stands a house that has captured the imagination of paranormal enthusiasts and ghost hunters alike, the Sallie House. Known for its dark history and terrifying encounters, the Sallie House has earned a reputation as one of the most haunted locations in America. The story of this eerie home begins in the early 20th century and continues to haunt those who dare to enter its walls today. The origins of the Sallie House date back to 1867, when it was originally built by a wealthy local doctor, Dr. Charles Finney. The house was intended to be a grand family residence, and for a time, it was a symbol of prosperity in Atchison. However, as the years went on, the house became a place of sorrow, loss, and unexplainable events, seeds for the terrifying legend that would later take root. The house remained in the Finney family until the 1930s, when it was sold. Over the years, various owners passed through the house, but the property's darkest chapter began when a young family moved in during the early 1990s, the haunting of the Sallie House. In 1993, Tony and Deborah Pickman moved into the Sallie House with their young daughter. At first, the house seemed like any other, quaint, quiet, and seemingly free of anything out of the ordinary. However, it didn't take long for strange things to begin happening. It started with small occurrences, cold spots in certain rooms, lights flickering, and items shifting positions. While these signs were unsettling, they could be chalked up to simple malfunctions or drafts. But as time passed, the disturbances grew more intense and far more terrifying. The first truly disturbing event occurred when the Pickman's young daughter, who was just a toddler at the time, began talking to an unseen presence in her room. She would call out to Sally, a name that no one in the household had ever mentioned before. At first, Tony and Deborah thought it was just a figment of their daughter's imagination. Children often have imaginary friends, after all. But things quickly took a darker turn. The family began experiencing physical manifestations of the haunting. Tony, in particular, was the target of these attacks. He would often wake up in the middle of the night to find scratches, bruises, and burns on his body. He also reported being pushed or even slapped by invisible forces. It wasn't just his body that was being affected. The house itself seemed to be alive with malevolent energy. The temperature would plummet suddenly, even in the middle of summer, and strange shadows would move across the walls. As the activity escalated, Tony and Deborah sought the help of a local psychic, who claimed that the house was being haunted by a young girl named Sally. According to the psychic, Sally had died in the house many years ago, though the exact details of her death remain unclear. Some reports suggest that she was a young child who had fallen ill and died in the home, while others claim that she had been the victim of a violent attack or a botched medical procedure. Regardless of the cause, the spirit of Sally seemed to be the primary entity responsible for the strange happenings. As the hauntings grew more violent, the Pickmans turned to paranormal investigators for help. In 1994, a team from the popular television show Sightings visited the Sally house to investigate the claims. What they uncovered was nothing short of terrifying. During their investigation, the crew recorded disturbing EVP, electronic voice phenomena, and captured unexplained activity on camera. Some of the investigators even reported feeling physically attacked, with one team member allegedly suffering scratches and burns on their body. Tony, who had already been experiencing violent attacks from the spirit of Sally, became convinced that the house was cursed or haunted by something much darker than just a young girl's spirit. His physical injuries continued to worsen, and he claimed to have seen Sally's ghostly figure, an apparition of a small, pale girl with dark eyes, wearing an old-fashioned dress. The ghost seemed to taunt him, darting in and out of his vision, always just out of reach. Despite the numerous investigations and the mounting evidence of paranormal activity, no one could explain the phenomenon with certainty. Was it a vengeful spirit tormenting the family? Or was there something far more sinister lurking in the house? Something that transcended the natural world? One of the most disturbing aspects of the Sally house legend is the suggestion that it is cursed, not just haunted. While the ghost of Sally is often at the center of the activity, there have been reports of other dark entities within the house, shadowy figures, disembodied voices, and violent poltergeist activity that seems to be connected to an ancient curse on the property. According to some theories, the house itself is built on a site that has been plagued by dark forces for centuries. There are rumors of occult practices being performed on the property, which may have attracted negative energy and spirits. Others speculate that the spirit of Sally is a conduit for even more malevolent entities that continue to haunt the home to this day. Many of those who have visited the Sally house have reported feeling a deep sense of dread when entering the property. The house's oppressive energy seems to seep into the souls of anyone who enters, and the fear of what lies inside lingers long after they've left. Some paranormal investigators who have spent the night in the house have claimed to experience vivid nightmares, visions, and feelings of overwhelming terror, leading some to believe that the Sally house is not merely haunted but cursed by dark forces. Today, the Sally house stands as one of the most notorious haunted locations in the United States. It has been the subject of numerous investigations, documentaries, and books. Paranormal enthusiasts flock to Atchison to experience the haunting for themselves, hoping to encounter the spirit of Sally or any other entities that may lurk in the house. However, despite the widespread interest in the Sally house, few have been willing to live in it for long periods of time. Those who have stayed in the house overnight often report feelings of unease, strange noises, and physical disturbances. Some visitors even claim to have been physically attacked or scratched, just as Tony Pickman was in the 1990s. The legend of the Sally House continues to evolve, with new accounts of ghostly encounters emerging regularly. Is the house truly haunted by the spirit of a young girl named Sally, or is something far darker at work? Whether it's a vengeful spirit, a curse, or simply the power of suggestion, the Sally House remains one of the most chilling haunted locations in the United States, a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead seem to blur, and the supernatural lingers just beneath the surface. The Sally House is a place of mystery, fear, and unexplainable phenomena. With its tragic history and terrifying hauntings, it has become a focal point for paranormal investigators and thrill seekers alike. The question of whether the haunting is a manifestation of the spirit of Sally or a darker force remains unanswered. But one thing is certain: the legacy of the Sally House will continue to haunt the town of Atchison, Kansas, for years to come. For those who dare to visit, the house stands as a chilling reminder that some mysteries are better left unexplored, because in the Sally House, not all ghosts are friendly, and not all stories have a happy ending. Story 22. The Black Dahlia Spirit, California. In the glamorous world of Hollywood, where stars are born and dreams come true, there lies a dark and tragic tale that has haunted the city for decades. The story of the Black Dahlia, one of the most notorious unsolved murder cases in history, has captivated the world for over 70 years. Yet, there's an unsettling belief that the ghost of Elizabeth Short, the woman who became known as the Black Dahlia, still roams the streets of Los Angeles, seeking justice for her brutal and mysterious death. The legend of the Black Dahlia Spirit is a haunting tale, one that intertwines murder, fame, and the lingering presence of a ghost seeking answers in the shadows of Hollywood. Elizabeth Short was a young woman, born in 1924 in Massachusetts, who moved to California in the hopes of making a career in acting. She arrived in Los Angeles in 1943, a city brimming with opportunity for aspiring stars, but also full of harsh realities for those seeking fame. Short's striking appearance, dark hair, pale skin, and sharp features caught the attention of many, but her dreams of stardom were never realized. Instead, her life would be cut tragically short in a way that would forever shroud her name in mystery. On January 15, 1947, Elizabeth Short's dismembered body was discovered in a vacant lot in Limer Park, Los Angeles. Her body had been carefully mutilated, her mouth cut into a chilling smile, her body drained of blood and severed at the waist. The gruesome nature of the murder and the lack of any clear suspects quickly turned Short's death into a sensation, with the media dubbing her the Black Dahlia. Despite extensive investigations, the case remained unsolved, and Elizabeth Short's death became one of Hollywood's darkest mysteries. For decades, the murder of Elizabeth Short has been a subject of intrigue and speculation. Numerous theories have emerged about who could have committed such a heinous crime, ranging from deranged individuals to high-profile suspects, including figures from Hollywood's elite. But while the true identity of her killer remains unknown, the mystery surrounding the Black Dahlia has given rise to a chilling and persistent belief that Elizabeth Short's spirit never truly left Los Angeles. As with many tragic and unresolved deaths, rumors began to circulate that the ghost of Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, haunted the streets of Hollywood, the very city where her dreams had been shattered. Some claim to have seen her ghostly figure, draped in the same black attire she wore during her life, walking the streets near the site where her body had been discovered. Others spoke of hearing her eerie cries or feeling her icy presence in the dark corners of old buildings and theaters. Over the years, many people have come forward with stories of encounters with the Black Dahlia Spirit. Some have reported seeing the apparition of a woman with striking dark hair and a pale complexion, walking alone at night. Her appearance is often described as haunting, her figure blurred and translucent, as though she is caught between the world of the living and the dead. Witnesses say that she appears in dark alleyways or on desolate streets, as if searching for something or someone, lost in the maze of her final, unfinished journey. One of the most famous stories comes from the Roosevelt Hotel in Hollywood, a historic hotel that has long been associated with paranormal activity. Guests and staff at the Roosevelt have reported hearing the soft sound of heels clicking on the floors late at night, accompanied by the unmistakable scent of roses, an eerie reminder of the Black Dahlia's tragic connection to the City of Dreams. In some accounts, a woman in a black dress has been spotted walking through the hotel lobby, vanishing without a trace moments later. The sightings are often accompanied by a sense of overwhelming sadness, as if the spirit of Elizabeth Short is mourning the life she never had. Another common report is of a strange presence in the halls of old theaters in Los Angeles. Some claim to have felt an inexplicable chill as they walk through the darkened lobbies or take their seats in the theater, only to later learn that Elizabeth Short had been a frequent visitor to these venues during her lifetime, hoping to land a role in a movie. Many believe that her ghost still lingers in these spaces, silently watching the actors and dreamers who now take the stage, longing for the career that was denied to her. But the Black Dahlia spirit is not just seen by passersby or hotel guests. It is also believed to interact with those who delve too deeply into her story. Paranormal investigators, intrigued by the mystery of her death, have visited the sites connected to Elizabeth Short's murder, hoping to make contact with her spirit. Some claim that during their investigations, they have received unexplained EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, including whispers of "help me" or "find me." Others say that they have felt the chilling presence of a woman's touch, or even witnessed her spirit trying to communicate through objects, knocking or moving things in a deliberate manner. In particular, those who attempt to conduct seances or investigations in the area surrounding the site of Elizabeth Short's murder have reported unsettling experiences. Some have felt an overwhelming sense of anger or frustration emanating from the spirit, as if Elizabeth is not at peace and is desperately seeking closure. The lack of justice for her brutal death is said to have kept her spirit bound to the earth, forever restless and in search of the truth. One investigation conducted by a group of paranormal researchers in the early 2000s led to what many consider to be one of the most compelling pieces of evidence. While conducting a session at the Roosevelt Hotel, the investigators asked if Elizabeth Short had any messages for them. Suddenly, one of the investigators felt a cold hand on their shoulder, and the lights in the room flickered violently before going out. When the lights came back on, the word Dahlia was spelled out on a chalkboard, as if by an unseen hand. This eerie message was interpreted by many as a sign that the Black Dahlia spirit was indeed trying to make contact and convey something about her unresolved fate. The Black Dahlia spirit is often seen as a reflection of the tragic and unresolved nature of Elizabeth Short's death. The murder case, which remains one of the most famous unsolved crimes in American history, has fueled speculation, obsession, and intrigue for decades. But many believe that Elizabeth Short's restless spirit is the key to unlocking the mystery, if only she can find the peace she so desperately seeks. For some, the Black Dahlia ghost is not just a spirit of sadness, but a spirit of vengeance, a woman who was robbed of her life and who now roams the streets of Los Angeles, demanding justice for the brutal act committed against her. While her killer may never be identified, there are those who believe that Elizabeth Short's ghost will continue to haunt Hollywood until the truth is finally revealed. Today, the legend of the Black Dahlia spirit continues to captivate both paranormal enthusiasts and those who are simply intrigued by the mystery of her death. The spirit of Elizabeth Short has become a symbol of the unsolved and the unknown, a ghost that refuses to fade into the past and whose tragic story remains one of the darkest chapters in Hollywood's history. For those who dare to look into the eyes of the Black Dahlia spirit, they may find that the line between the living and the dead is thinner than they ever imagined. Whether she is a vengeful ghost or a tragic figure lost in time, the Black Dahlia spirit has become an enduring part of Los Angeles folklore, a haunting reminder of a woman's life cut short and the shadow of mystery that still looms over her unsolved murder. The Black Dahlia spirit is one of Hollywood's most enduring and chilling legends, with her ghost reportedly still haunting the streets of Los Angeles. Her tragic death continues to intrigue and unsettle those who encounter her. The mystery of who killed Elizabeth Short may never be solved, but as long as her spirit roams the city, the story of the Black Dahlia will live on, her quest for justice, and the secrets of Hollywood's dark past, forever entwined in the annals of American crime. Story 23. Annabelle the Doll, Connecticut. In the quiet town of Monroe, Connecticut, there exists a chilling tale that has captivated the imaginations of horror fans and paranormal investigators alike. A tale of a seemingly innocent doll, Annabelle, whose terrifying reputation has become synonymous with fear, possession, and demonic forces. The story of Annabelle is not just the story of a cursed doll, but of the dark power it allegedly holds and the haunting legacy it has left in its wake. The legend of Annabelle begins in the early 1970s when a young nursing student named Donna was given an unusual gift by her mother, a Raggedy Ann doll. At first glance, Annabelle seemed harmless enough, with its bright red hair, stitched smile, and wide, innocent eyes. Donna, a college student living with a roommate named Angie, placed the doll in her apartment, and it wasn't long before things started to take a strange turn. At first, Donna and Angie noticed small, odd occurrences. The doll, which was kept on Donna's bed, would frequently be found in different positions, sitting up when they had left it lying down, or moved to a different place in the room entirely. At first, the roommates dismissed these occurrences as simple forgetfulness or the result of an overactive imagination. However, things escalated quickly. One day, Donna and Angie came home to find that Annabelle had somehow moved to a completely different room. The most alarming part was that the doll was now found with a note placed on the floor nearby, written in a childlike scrawl. "Help me." The roommates, now deeply unsettled, decided to seek help from a medium to understand the mysterious happenings. The medium contacted by Donna and Angie informed them that the doll was inhabited by the spirit of a young girl named Annabelle Higgins. According to the medium, Annabelle was the spirit of a 7-year-old girl who had died on the property where Donna and Angie's apartment now stood. The medium claimed that Annabelle's spirit was not malevolent and simply wanted to be loved and cared for. In an attempt to help, the roommates allowed the spirit to possess the doll, believing that it was the right thing to do. But they were gravely mistaken. The strange occurrences did not stop. In fact, they grew worse. Annabelle's movements became more erratic, and the two roommates began noticing things that were even more terrifying. The doll would leave deep scratch marks on the surfaces of their furniture and walls. Angie, in particular, felt the doll's presence in ways that were hard to explain. She began waking up with deep, painful scratches across her body, scratches that seemed to appear overnight. As the paranormal activity intensified, Donna and Angie reached out to a local priest for help. But it wasn't until they contacted the famous demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren that the true horror of Annabelle's spirit was revealed. Ed and Lorraine Warren, renowned paranormal investigators, were called in to assess the situation in 1972. Upon inspecting the apartment, they quickly realized that Annabelle was not simply inhabited by the spirit of a little girl, but was instead being controlled by a much darker force, a demon. The demon had attached itself to the doll, using the innocent spirit of Annabelle as a vessel to gain power and influence over the human world. The Warrens explained that the doll's malevolent nature was far beyond the capabilities of a simple haunted object. It was not a harmless or benign spirit that inhabited the doll, but a demonic force that was capable of manipulating the physical world. Ed and Lorraine warned Donna and Angie that the doll was dangerous and needed to be removed immediately. Realizing the grave danger they were in, Ed and Lorraine Warren took the doll into their possession. But the trouble didn't end there. As the Warrens drove the doll back to their home in Monroe, Connecticut, they experienced a series of strange occurrences. The car, driven by Ed, was suddenly jolted and swerved uncontrollably on the road. At one point, the vehicle nearly crashed as the brakes failed. Ed later recounted that the demon inside the doll was actively trying to harm them. Once the Warrens safely arrived home, they placed Annabelle in a glass display case that they had specially built to contain the doll's malevolent energy. The case, which is now on display in the Warrens Occult Museum, is engraved with the words, "Warning, positively do not open. The case serves as a constant reminder of the terror that Annabelle has caused and the dark power she holds. Despite being contained in the case, Annabelle's evil influence has not entirely been quelled. People who have visited the museum and taunted the doll have reported unsettling experiences. Some have claimed to feel an overwhelming sense of dread while standing near the glass case, while others have felt the urge to mock or provoke the doll. Those who did so often report strange accidents or near-death experiences shortly afterward, such as car crashes, falls, or unexplained illnesses. The story of Annabelle did not stay contained in the walls of the Warrens Museum for long. Over the years, the doll's reputation as one of the most terrifying haunted objects in the world only grew. In 2014, the tale of Annabelle was brought to a new generation through the release of Annabelle, a spin-off movie of the Conjuring franchise. The film, though fictionalized, was based on the real events surrounding the haunted doll and introduced the public to the terrifying story of Annabelle once again. The doll's legacy has also inspired countless paranormal investigations, documentaries, and books, all centered around the demonic entity that is said to possess Annabelle. Many people continue to visit the Warrens Occult Museum, hoping to get a glimpse of the doll and experience the fear that she represents. The case, though locked and secured, remains a focal point of fascination, a warning to anyone who dares to underestimate the power of the supernatural. Despite Annabelle's containment, the haunting stories continue. In recent years, visitors to the museum have reported strange feelings of unease when standing near the doll's case. Paranormal investigators who have visited the museum have claimed to experience strange phenomena, such as unexplainable temperature drops, faint whispers, or sudden bursts of activity on their equipment. There are even stories of individuals who have mocked or provoked the doll, only to face consequences later. Some claim to have experienced terrifying nightmares or have felt as if the doll was following them, its malevolent energy creeping into their lives long after they left the museum. One particularly chilling incident involved a young man who, after visiting the museum and taunting Annabelle, was involved in a serious motorcycle accident on his way home. He survived, but the crash left him with serious injuries. In the hospital, he reportedly told nurses that the last thing he remembered before the accident was seeing the doll's face in his rearview mirror, as if Annabelle had been watching him, waiting for her revenge. The story of Annabelle the doll is not just about a haunted object. It is about the dark forces that may lie hidden beneath the surface of the mundane. Annabelle's tale is a chilling reminder that some spirits and the demons that inhabit them are not bound by the rules of the living world. The doll's malevolent presence has left an indelible mark on the world of the paranormal, and its story continues to haunt those who dare to investigate it. Whether you believe in the supernatural or not, the legend of Annabelle remains a warning. Sometimes, some things are better left undisturbed. The case that holds Annabelle in the Warrens Occult Museum serves as a testament to the terrifying power that still lingers around this innocuous-looking doll. And for anyone who ventures too close, the warning remains: do not open. Story 24. The Screaming Bridge, Ohio. In the quiet countryside of rural Ohio, hidden deep in the woods and far from the bustling noise of city life, there stands a decaying and rusted bridge that has become infamous for its eerie reputation. Known as the Screaming Bridge, this forsaken structure has been the subject of ghostly legends for generations. For those who dare to cross its weathered planks after dark, the bridge offers a terrifying experience. Many locals claim to hear the faint, unearthly screams of a woman in agony. Some say it's the spirit of a young girl who met a tragic end, while others believe it's the ghost of a woman seeking revenge. Regardless of its origins, the story of the Screaming Bridge has captivated the imagination of thrill seekers, ghost hunters, and those brave enough to face its haunting mystery. The legend of the Screaming Bridge dates back to the early 19th century, though the exact details of the tragedy that spawned it remain unclear. Some stories suggest that the bridge was built in the late 1800s, spanning a small creek in the outskirts of a rural Ohio town. The surrounding area was once a popular route for travelers, and the bridge itself had a relatively quiet history, until a fateful night in the 1920s when a horrific event occurred. According to one of the most widely accepted versions of the story, a young woman named Sarah was on her way to visit her fiancé, who lived on the other side of the creek. She had been walking along the bridge late at night during a storm when her life took a tragic turn. As she crossed the old wooden planks, a sudden flash of lightning illuminated the sky. The thunder was deafening, and in the confusion and fear of the storm, Sarah lost her footing and fell from the bridge, plummeting to the water below. Though Sarah's body was found shortly after, her death was ruled accidental. But some believe that Sarah did not die by chance. According to other variations of the tale, Sarah's death was the result of foul play. Some say that her fiancé, consumed by jealousy, had pushed her from the bridge during a heated argument, while others suggest that a stranger may have been responsible for her demise. Regardless of the truth, her death became the catalyst for the haunting of the bridge. Soon after Sarah's tragic death, reports began to surface of strange occurrences near the bridge. Travelers and locals who crossed the bridge at night began to hear unsettling noises, the sound of anguished screams echoing through the trees and across the water. At first, the town's residents dismissed the rumors, but the occurrences grew more frequent and more vivid. Some claimed to have seen a spectral figure, a young woman in white, standing on the bridge or walking along the bank of the creek, her face contorted in pain. Others reported hearing disembodied voices, crying out in terror, even when no one was around. The most chilling of all the stories was the eerie scream that could be heard late at night. It was described as a blood-curdling wail, full of anguish and despair, as if someone were in terrible pain. The scream was so powerful that it would echo through the woods and shake those who heard it to their core. Many drivers who had passed over the bridge at night claimed to have heard the scream, only to find no one in sight when they stopped to investigate. Some even said that they felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as though something malevolent was watching them from the shadows. Locals began to whisper that the bridge was cursed, and that Sarah's restless spirit was trapped there, forever reliving the horror of her final moments. The scream that people heard was said to be her cry for justice, or perhaps an expression of the agony she endured when she fell to her death. As the years passed, the bridge, which had once been a simple crossing for travelers, gained a reputation as a haunted landmark. People from surrounding towns began visiting the screaming bridge, hoping to hear the cries or see the phantom figure that had become part of local folklore. Some curious individuals tried to provoke the spirit, daring the ghost of Sarah to appear. But many of these visitors left the area in terror, claiming to have heard the screams, or worse, encountered the ghost of Sarah herself. In the 1950s, the bridge was abandoned due to structural decay. The local government deemed it unsafe for use and erected a gate to prevent people from crossing. Despite the closure, the eerie occurrences did not stop. In fact, the bridge became an even more popular destination for those interested in the paranormal. It wasn't long before stories of the hauntings at the Screaming Bridge spread far beyond Ohio, drawing attention from paranormal enthusiasts and even ghost hunting groups. But it wasn't just the scream that kept people coming back. There were more sinister stories attached to the bridge. Some said that people who lingered on the bridge too long began to feel a strange pull, as though something was drawing them into the creek below. There were reports of strange cold spots, shadowy figures darting in and out of sight, and even feelings of being touched by unseen hands. Those brave enough to venture into the woods around the bridge reported hearing whispers in the dark, as if Sarah, or something much darker, was watching them from the trees. One particular legend that emerged over the years claimed that anyone who crossed the bridge after midnight would see an apparition of Sarah standing at the center, her pale face twisted in sorrow, her hands outstretched as if beckoning the living to join her in the depths below. Some claimed that those who ignored the warning and crossed the bridge after hearing her eerie cries would soon meet an untimely fate, whether from an accident or a mysterious illness. As the years passed, the Screaming Bridge became a notorious spot for urban legends, attracting thrill seekers and paranormal investigators. Many who visited the bridge after dark claimed to have experienced something truly unsettling. Some said they saw an apparition standing near the water. Others spoke of the sound of rustling footsteps behind them, though no one was visible. The scream would often pierce the silence, sending shivers down the spines of those who dared to stay in the area. One of the most infamous incidents occurred in the early 1990s when a group of young people decided to visit the bridge for a late-night thrill. According to the group's account, they had heard the scream while standing on the bridge, but when they tried to leave, their car wouldn't start. Panic set in, and the group claimed to hear footsteps approaching from behind them, even though no one else was in sight. They managed to escape after what they described as an overwhelming sense of impending doom. Though they never spoke about the incident again, the story became one of the most widely circulated in local folklore. The eerie, otherworldly experience that many people had while visiting the Screaming Bridge suggested that there was something far more sinister at work than just the tragic death of Sarah. Some believe the bridge to be cursed, a place where not only the spirit of Sarah lingers, but where other dark entities may reside, drawn to the negative energy surrounding the area. Today, the Screaming Bridge is still a popular destination for ghost hunters and those interested in the paranormal, though it remains a place steeped in mystery and fear. While the bridge itself has been closed off to traffic, the site continues to attract visitors, many of whom leave with unsettling experiences and eerie memories. Some claim to have heard the blood-curdling scream that has made the bridge famous, while others report hearing whispers or feeling a cold presence. Though the true origin of the haunting remains unclear, whether it was a tragic accident, foul play, or something more supernatural, the Screaming Bridge remains one of Ohio's most infamous haunted locations. It stands as a testament to the dark history of the area, a place where the restless spirit of a woman, or perhaps something much darker, calls out from beyond the veil. And for those brave enough to visit, the chilling sound of a scream in the night may just be waiting to remind them that some stories and some spirits refuse to be forgotten. Story 25. The Vampire of Rhode Island. Rhode Island, with its serene coastal towns, colonial charm, and rich history, might not seem like the setting for a dark, supernatural tale. Yet, nestled deep within the wooded backroads of this quiet New England state, there lies a chilling legend that has persisted for nearly 2 centuries. This is the story of the Vampire of Rhode Island, a tale of a family cursed, a creature thirsting for blood, and a town forever haunted by the echoes of a malevolent force that once stalked its woods. The roots of the story reach back to the early 1800s in the small, rural town of Exeter, Rhode Island. Known for its deep forests and quiet farmlands, Exeter was a place where life moved slowly, untouched by the bustling progress of the industrial age. The town was home to a large, modest farmstead owned by John Miller and his family. John, a quiet man with a penchant for solitude, lived on the farm with his wife and their 2 children, Sarah and Thomas, and a handful of animals that kept the farm running. Though the Miller family was known to be hard-working and kind, there was something undeniably strange about their home. John in particular had always been a bit of an enigma. As he aged, his once youthful appearance grew increasingly gaunt. His complexion grew unnaturally pale, and his blue eyes, once bright and full of life, became hollow and distant. His movements became more erratic, and he often seemed fatigued, as if drained of energy. Over time, John's behavior became more peculiar. He spent longer hours inside, avoiding the sunlight and any social interactions with the neighbors. Despite his oddities, the town didn't suspect anything sinister, at least not at first. But when John's wife fell ill, followed by Sarah and Thomas, strange events began to unfold that no one could explain. The first sign of something amiss came when Miller, who had always been vibrant and full of life, suddenly became bedridden with a mysterious illness. Her once healthy body began to waste away, and her skin became pale and sallow. As the days passed, her condition worsened, and soon, both of her children began to show the same troubling symptoms. Sarah and Thomas became pale, lethargic, and weak, and they spent most of their days confined to their beds. The doctors were baffled. No one could pinpoint the cause of the illness, but one thing was clear: whatever it was spreading quickly through the family. John Miller, despite his own increasingly sickly appearance, remained oddly detached from the situation. He would tend to his family in the evenings, but during the day he seemed to withdraw into his home, avoiding any questions from neighbors or town officials. This strange behavior only fueled suspicion, and soon, the townspeople began to whisper about the Miller family's plight. It was only after Sarah passed away, followed by and then Thomas, that the town's fears were confirmed. The bodies of the Miller family members were discovered to have been drained of blood, and their deaths were inexplicably quick and untimely. The town's doctor, Dr. Nathaniel Hall, who had been called to examine the bodies, was struck with horror as he noted the strange condition of the corpses. They were unnaturally pale, and there was no sign of decay, as one would expect from bodies that had been dead for some time. Worse still, they showed puncture wounds on their necks, clear signs that someone had been feeding on their blood. The townsfolk, desperate for answers, decided to investigate further. They gathered in groups, armed with torches and makeshift weapons, and went to the Miller farmstead, convinced that something unnatural had occurred. It was there that they found John Miller, or what was left of him. When the townspeople confronted John, they were horrified to find that he had not decayed like his family members. Instead, he appeared far more alive than anyone could have expected. His skin was a sickly pallor, his eyes sunken and glowing with an unnatural light. His teeth, once normal, had become elongated and sharp, resembling the fangs of a predatory creature. His appearance was so grotesque, so inhuman, that it was clear to the townspeople John Miller had become a vampire. It was said that John had been born a man, but over the years, he had transformed into something else, something monstrous. His transformation had been gradual. At first, a strange pallor and fatigue, followed by a deepened need to consume the blood of his own family. With each passing year, his thirst grew stronger, and he became more and more dependent on the life force of those closest to him. John had slowly drained the vitality of his wife and children, using them to feed his insatiable hunger, and in doing so, condemned them to a fate far worse than death. The townspeople were struck by a terrifying realization. John Miller had not only been draining the blood of his family members, but had also been the cause of their rapid decline. It was clear that his unholy transformation had driven him to feed on his loved ones, turning them into nothing more than vessels for his dark appetite. Fearful of what might happen next, the townsfolk banded together and set out to end the vampire's reign of terror once and for all. Armed with stakes and torches, they made their way to the Miller farmstead, determined to rid the town of the creature that had brought death to their community. But John was not an easy target. Despite his weakened state, he was far stronger and faster than any man, and he fought fiercely against those who tried to destroy him. For hours, the battle raged throughout the night. The townspeople fought with all their might, but John proved to be a formidable adversary. It wasn't until the first light of dawn broke over the horizon that they finally gained the upper hand. With a desperate final effort, one of the townsmen, named William Crane, drove a wooden stake through John's heart. The vampire howled in agony, a sound that chilled the blood of everyone nearby, before his body crumbled to dust, leaving nothing but a pile of ash in the early morning light. Though John Miller was gone, the town of Exeter was never the same again. The vampire's curse lingered over the land, and strange occurrences continued to plague the region. People reported seeing shadowy figures wandering the woods near the Miller farmstead, and on certain nights, those who ventured too close to the farm would hear the faint sound of footsteps, as if someone or something was following them. The memory of John's reign of terror was forever etched into the collective memory of Exeter. Though John Miller was dead, the legend of the vampire of Rhode Island continued to haunt the town for generations. In the years that followed, visitors who dared to venture to the Miller farmstead spoke of unsettling sensations, cold spots, the sensation of being watched, and whispers in the night. Some claimed to have seen a pale figure in the distance, standing motionless beneath the trees. Others spoke of an overwhelming sense of dread that settled over them when they neared the site of the Miller home. The farmstead itself eventually fell into ruin, its once grand house now a crumbling shell of its former self. But the stories lived on, passed down from one generation to the next. Over time, The tale of the vampire of Rhode Island grew into a local legend, whispered among the townspeople and told around campfires. Some believed that John Miller's spirit still haunted the area, bound to the place where his monstrous transformation had begun. In recent years, paranormal investigators and thrill seekers have descended on the abandoned farmstead, hoping to catch a glimpse of the vampire's lingering presence. Though some claim to have witnessed strange phenomena, flickering lights, moving shadows, and the sudden chill of the air, no one has ever been able to prove that the vampire's curse still endures. However, for those who live in Exeter, the legend is far from forgotten. It serves as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind even the most peaceful of facades. The Vampire of Rhode Island is a tale of love twisted into madness, a tragic family destroyed by an insatiable thirst for blood, and a town forever haunted by the echoes of their demise. Whether or not John Miller was truly a vampire remains a mystery, but the eerie events surrounding his family's deaths and his own transformation continue to intrigue and terrify. And perhaps, somewhere in the shadows of the Rhode Island woods, John Miller's curse still lingers, waiting for the next soul to cross his path. Story 26. The Phantom of Flight 401, Florida. On the night of December 29, 1972, Eastern Airlines Flight 401 was meant to be just another routine flight from New York's JFK Airport to Miami International. However, the journey would soon become one of the most terrifying and mysterious events in the history of aviation. The crash of Flight 401, resulting in the deaths of 101 people, left behind not only a tragic legacy, but a series of eerie and unexplainable occurrences that would haunt the skies for years to come. This is the story of the Phantom of Flight 401, a tale of ghostly apparitions, restless spirits, and the tragic aftermath of a plane disaster that lingers in the collective memory. Flight 401, a Lockheed L-1011 TriStar, was piloted by a highly experienced crew, including Captain Robert Loft, First Officer Maurice Mike Sweeney, and Flight Engineer Don Repo. The aircraft was brand new, a modern marvel of engineering, capable of flying long distances with state-of-the-art systems and advanced safety features. Loft, a seasoned captain with over 30 years of flying experience, had worked on various aircraft throughout his career, and Sweeney was no less experienced, having logged thousands of hours in the cockpit. The flight began like any other: smooth takeoff, steady cruising, and relatively calm weather conditions. However, a small but troubling malfunction soon arose. The autopilot warning light on the cockpit panel illuminated, signaling that there was a technical issue with the system. The crew's attention shifted to the problem, and soon Captain Loft and First Officer Sweeney were distracted by troubleshooting the malfunction. They became focused on resolving the issue, with both pilots concentrating on the autopilot controls and trying to figure out the root cause of the problem. During this critical period, the flight crew's focus shifted away from the plane's altitude and descent. Unbeknownst to them, the aircraft had begun a gradual descent toward the Florida Everglades, unnoticed by the crew due to their intense attention on the malfunction. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. At 11:42 p.m., Flight 401 crashed into the swampy Everglades, around 18 miles west of Miami. The crash was catastrophic. Of the 163 people on board, 101 were killed, including the captain and first officer. The survivors were scattered across the wreckage, severely injured, but miraculously, some managed to escape the wreckage alive. Among them were Don Repo, the flight engineer, and several flight attendants. The crash of Flight 401 was a tragedy that shocked the nation. Yet, the story didn't end with the impact of the disaster. Instead, it gave birth to a chilling legend, the tale of the Phantom of Flight 401. In the months following the crash, strange and unsettling reports began to surface from crew members on other Eastern Airlines flights. Flight attendants and pilots on subsequent flights began to describe seeing the apparitions of Captain Loft and First Officer Sweeney. The sightings weren't limited to one particular route or flight. They were happening all across Eastern Airlines' fleet. One of the first reports came from a flight attendant on a flight between Miami and New York. She described encountering a man in the cockpit who appeared to be Captain Loft. even though she knew he had perished in the crash months before. The man was wearing the same uniform as Loft, and he was speaking calmly with the crew, offering assistance and advice about the flight. She did not immediately recognize him as the ghost of the deceased captain, as he appeared very much alive. However, when she checked the crew roster later, she found that no one matching his description was on board. On a subsequent flight, another crew member reported a strange occurrence. As she walked through the cabin, she noticed a man seated in the first-class section, again in a pilot's uniform. He was sitting alone, silently watching the passengers as the flight went on. The flight attendant approached him and asked if he needed assistance. The man spoke in a deep, calm voice, saying he was a pilot, but didn't specify which airline he worked for. The attendant didn't think much of it at first, but when she returned later to check on the man, he was gone, vanished, with no sign of him anywhere. In the days and weeks that followed, similar reports came in from various flights. Passengers and flight attendants alike claimed to have encountered a man who resembled Captain Loft, speaking to them from the cockpit or appearing in the cabin. But each time, when they attempted to interact with him, the man would disappear without a trace. It became clear that something strange was happening in the skies, and it seemed to be connected to the wreckage of Flight 401. As the sightings of Captain Loft and First Officer Sweeney continued, a more unsettling theory began to take shape. It was revealed that parts of the wreckage from Flight 401, including the cockpit seats, the flight controls, and even the landing gear, had been salvaged from the crash site and reused in other Eastern Airlines aircraft. These parts, which had once been part of the doomed flight, were incorporated into the airline's fleet, and it seemed that this was no coincidence. Many believed that the spirits of the deceased crew members had become attached to the salvaged parts of Flight 401. Some thought that their souls had not moved on, perhaps because they had died so suddenly and violently in the crash. The tragic and violent nature of their deaths, combined with the fact that the wreckage was being reused, might have created a bond between the spirits and the parts of the aircraft. This connection, it was speculated, was causing the ghosts to reappear on flights operated with the salvage materials. The most chilling aspect of this theory was that the apparitions were not just confined to the pilots. Don Repo, the flight engineer who had survived the crash, was also reported to have appeared on flights after the disaster. Crew members claimed to have seen him walking through the cabin, offering assistance just as he had on the doomed flight. In one particularly eerie account, a flight attendant reported seeing Repo in the galley, where he quietly advised her on how to deal with a malfunction in the kitchen equipment. When she looked again, he had disappeared, and no one else had seen him. The fact that the spirits of both pilots and flight engineer had been sighted aboard multiple flights led to growing fear and superstition within Eastern Airlines. Pilots, crew members, and passengers alike began to wonder if the haunted flights were somehow cursed. Were the spirits of Flight 401 forever trapped aboard the planes they once flew? Were they seeking to guide the new crew members or to communicate a warning? The unsettling nature of these apparitions left many uneasy, and stories of ghostly encounters continued to spread. As reports of the ghostly apparitions continued, the staff of Eastern Airlines began to take notice. Many of the crew members began to fear flying on planes that had been serviced with parts from Flight 401, and some even claimed to experience a sense of dread or unease when working on these flights. In an attempt to put the rumors to rest, Eastern Airlines turned to spiritual means. One of the most notable attempts to rid the planes of these apparitions involved a priest. It was said that the airline hired a Catholic priest to bless the aircraft that had been rebuilt with the salvage parts. The priest reportedly performed several exorcisms, attempting to cleanse the aircraft of any lingering spirits. However, despite these efforts, the sightings continued. Some passengers claimed that the blessings only seemed to increase the frequency of the apparitions. The more the airline tried to rid the planes of the haunting, the more it seemed that the spirits of Flight 401 clung to the aircraft. Despite the airline's efforts to resolve the supernatural occurrences, the haunting legacy of Flight 401 continued. The eerie sightings began to fade over time, but the story of the Phantom of Flight 401 remains one of the most chilling legends in aviation history. Today, The crash of Flight 401 and its aftermath is remembered not just for the tragic loss of life, but for the inexplicable ghostly phenomena that followed. Some believe that the spirits of the pilots and flight engineer are still lingering, caught between the earthly realm and the afterlife. Others argue that the appearances were merely the result of coincidence, mass hysteria, or the power of suggestion. Regardless of the explanation, the haunting of Flight 401 remains an enduring mystery. The story continues to captivate those interested in the supernatural, the unexplainable, and the tragic. It serves as a reminder of the fragility of life and the eerie persistence of the past. The ghosts of Flight 401, if they still linger, may never fully leave the skies. Story 27. The Witch of Yazoo, Mississippi. In the small, quiet town of Yazoo City, Mississippi, nestled among the winding rivers and dense swamps of the Deep South, there exists a chilling legend, one that has been whispered through the generations like an ancient curse. The story of the Witch of Yazoo is a tale that has left an indelible mark on the town's history, a dark and unsettling legend of vengeance, death, and a powerful supernatural force that no one in the town could ever escape. This is the story of Eliza Turner, the woman who would become known as the Witch of Yazoo, an outsider who came to the town in the early 1800s and, through a twisted web of magic, love, betrayal, and revenge, would forever change the fate of the people who crossed her path. It was the early 1800s, and Yazoo was a prosperous town. Surrounded by fertile land and blessed with the wealth brought by the river trade, the town seemed to be thriving. But there was an air of superstition, too. People in the Deep South have long been known to harbor both faith in religion and belief in things beyond the natural world. Into this town came a woman by the name of Eliza Turner. She appeared one spring, seemingly out of nowhere. Her striking appearance immediately caught the attention of the townsfolk. Her dark, flowing hair, pale skin, and deep, penetrating eyes seemed almost otherworldly. She arrived alone and rented a small house on the edge of town, near the woods that bordered the great Yazoo River. Despite her beauty, there was something unsettling about her, an enigmatic aura that caused people to whisper behind her back. She never spoke of her past, and no one knew where she had come from, what her purpose was, or even what she truly wanted. Most of the town assumed she was a widow or a displaced woman of fortune, but no one knew for sure. Eliza was not an ordinary woman. She often went into the forests surrounding Yazoo, returning with bundles of herbs, strange trinkets, and mysterious symbols carved into old trees. Some claimed to have seen her at night, standing alone in the moonlight, muttering incantations under her breath. The rumors about her grew. Some said she was a healer, gifted with the knowledge of ancient remedies, while others whispered that she was a witch who communed with dark forces. Eliza kept to herself, but her presence was impossible to ignore. Among those who took an interest in Eliza was Thomas Radford, a young, handsome merchant in the town. He was known for his charm and kindness, and he had many admirers. However, Thomas was not like the others in Yazoo. He was unafraid of the rumors surrounding Eliza. Rather than fear her, he was intrigued by her. He found her mysterious, her silence and aloofness something that drew him in like a moth to a flame. Despite the warnings from his friends and family, Thomas began courting Eliza. He would visit her house often, and the two would speak for hours. To him, Eliza was a woman of grace and intellect. He was fascinated by her knowledge of the natural world, her deep understanding of plants, herbs, and the hidden forces that seemed to animate the universe. Eliza, in turn, seemed to appreciate Thomas's company, and soon their relationship blossomed. But something was wrong. As their love grew, so did a sinister shift in Eliza's behavior. Her eyes, once warm and welcoming, grew cold. She became distant, and rumors began to spread that something dark was happening. People whispered that Thomas's health was deteriorating rapidly. At first, no one could understand what was happening. Thomas had been a picture of health, strong, vibrant, and filled with energy, but now he was pale, weak, and thin. He seemed to lose his vitality by the day, and his once cheerful demeanor grew dark and withdrawn. Some said it was the weight of his love for Eliza that had drained him. Others speculated that Eliza's magic, whether intentional or not, was slowly consuming him. Soon, Thomas's decline became impossible to ignore. He was bedridden, unable to speak, his body growing frilier with each passing day. The doctors could find no cause for his illness, and the town began to fear that Eliza was behind his condition. One fateful day, Thomas was found dead in his bed. His body was cold, his skin almost translucent, and his eyes wide open, staring into nothingness. The townsfolk were horrified, and many blamed Eliza for his sudden death. They believed that she had cast a spell on him or used him as a vessel for some dark magic. Rumors swirled about the nature of their relationship. Whispers that Eliza had used Thomas in some dark ritual, draining his life force, perhaps even using him for a sacrificial purpose. Others speculated that she had lured him into a twisted web of supernatural power, turning him into a puppet in her quest for eternal life. Eliza, however, did not mourn. She seemed eerily calm in the wake of Thomas's death, her face unreadable, her demeanor unchanged. The townspeople, already fearful of her, began to turn on her completely. They gathered in the town square, demanding that Eliza leave Yazoo immediately. They accused her of witchcraft, of murder, of being the cause of the tragedy that had befallen Thomas. But Eliza did not leave. Instead, she stood before them, cold and defiant. She raised her voice, cursing the town and vowing to exact vengeance on all who had wronged her. She swore that Yazoo would never know peace again, that its people would suffer as she had suffered, and that her power would grow as the years passed. As Eliza disappeared into the woods that night, the town's woes only worsened. At first, it was small things, cattle mysteriously dying, crops wilting despite the best efforts of farmers, strange illnesses that no doctor could diagnose. But soon, these occurrences became more deadly. Children began to disappear without a trace. Women were found murdered in their homes, and men were found dead in the streets, their bodies contorted in grotesque ways. The town fell into chaos, and it was clear to all who lived there that Eliza's curse was real. Yazoo, once a thriving community, had become a town of suffering. Fear hung in the air like a dark cloud, and no one was safe. The most terrifying aspect of the curse was that it didn't just strike at random. It seemed to target those who had condemned Eliza. The elders who had led the charge to expel her from Yazoo were the first to die. Their deaths were strange and unexplained, with many of them found with expressions of absolute terror frozen on their faces. The once strong leaders of the town were now gone, and those who remained could only wonder if they would be next. In desperation, the townsfolk tried to confront Eliza once more. A group of men and women, armed with torches and pitchforks, ventured into the woods where Eliza was said to live. They searched the woods for days, following the trail of death and decay that had followed in her wake. Eventually, they found her, standing alone in a clearing, surrounded by an aura of darkness. But when they approached her, it was as if they had entered a different realm entirely. The ground beneath their feet seemed to shift and writhe, and the air grew cold and thick with the scent of decay. Eliza stood in the center of the clearing, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. She smiled, a cruel, knowing smile, and whispered a final curse. As the men tried to approach her, they felt their bodies growing weaker, their minds clouded with fear and confusion. One by one, they fell to their knees, as though the very earth had claimed them. The last thing they saw before they died was Eliza's cold, unblinking stare, and the soft, mocking words she whispered into the night. "This town is mine now." In the years that followed, Yazoo City became a ghost town, its once thriving streets now silent and empty. Few dared to stay in the town, and those who did reported strange happenings. Shadows moved in the corner of their vision, and the sound of whispers filled the air. The legacy of Eliza Turner, the Witch of Yazoo, lived on, haunting the town she had cursed. Some say that on stormy nights, if you wander too close to the woods, you can still hear Eliza's voice whispering on the wind, vowing vengeance on the descendants of those who wronged her. Others claim that her ghost still walks the earth, bound to the cursed land, forever seeking retribution. As for Yazoo, the legend of Eliza Turner is a reminder of the darkness that can consume a town when a powerful spirit seeks vengeance. The Witch of Yazoo, in her quest for power and revenge, has become a symbol of the town's tragic downfall, a haunting presence that will never leave the town's history and will forever be part of the Southern darkness. Story 28. The Dead Children's Playground, Alabama. Tucked in the shadow of the Maple Hill Cemetery in Huntsville, Alabama, lies a chilling landmark that has been the subject of whispers for generations. A place known as the Dead Children's Playground. With its swings that move on their own, the unsettling sound of children's laughter carried by the wind, and the sense of something watching from the trees, the playground has earned its eerie reputation. What was once a quiet area where children could play has become a site of mysterious occurrences, leading many to wonder. Is it the spirits of the children buried nearby that haunt the grounds? Or is there something darker at work? The tale of the Dead Children's Playground is deeply woven into the town's history, linked to tragic events and haunting memories that linger in the air. This story is one of innocence turned to tragedy, of restless spirits, and of a place that seems forever stuck between the living and the dead. Huntsville, a city with a long and storied past, is home to many historical sites, but perhaps none as haunting as Maple Hill Cemetery. Founded in the early 1800s, it is the final resting place of many of Huntsville's most prominent citizens, with graves stretching across over 100 acres of land. However, it is the section of the cemetery where the graves of children lie that has captured the public's imagination and fear. These graves, marked by small, worn tombstones and often decorated with forgotten toys or faded flowers, tell stories of lives lost too soon. Many of these children died in infancy or early childhood, victims of diseases like smallpox, diphtheria, and the Spanish flu that ravaged the town in the early 20th century. Their lives were brief, but the memories of their loss were lasting. The cemetery itself, shaded by ancient oak trees and overgrown with ivy, is a peaceful place during the day, quiet and serene. But once the sun begins to set, a different atmosphere settles over Maple Hill. It is a place that many locals avoid after dark, fearful of the legends that have persisted for over a century. In the 1920s, as Huntsville expanded and grew, a decision was made to add a playground to the cemetery grounds. At first glance, this seemed like a well-meaning gesture. Children needed a place to play, and the city thought it would be nice to place a small playground near the cemetery to give them an area to run and enjoy the outdoors while their parents could visit their departed loved ones. The playground, built on the edge of the cemetery, consisted of a set of swings, a merry-go-round, and a slide, simple, yet charming. It wasn't long, however, before the innocent nature of this decision would give way to a far darker reality. The proximity of the playground to the graves of so many dead children quickly became more than just a strange coincidence. People began to notice things they couldn't explain. Swings that moved without wind, the eerie feeling that something was watching you from the trees, and strange sounds, whispers, laughter, and even voices calling out to those who dared to enter the playground. At first, these occurrences were dismissed as figments of the imagination, strange quirks of the environment, or overactive imaginations at play. But as time went on, they became harder to ignore. The first known supernatural event occurred in the 1930s, when a local family visited the cemetery on a warm summer evening. As they sat on a bench, the children ran to the swings. There was no breeze, no movement in the air, and yet the swings began to creak and sway as though someone was pushing them. The parents dismissed it as the wind, but as the children's laughter rang through the air, they began to feel an odd chill on the back of their necks. It wasn't until later that night, when they returned home, that they realized one of their daughters had lost a small wooden toy, a toy that was found near the swings the next morning. Over the next few decades, more strange reports surfaced. Visitors to the cemetery began to hear faint laughter echoing through the air late at night, coming from the playground. Some claimed they could hear the sound of children playing on the swings, even when no one was there. The strange noises seemed to grow louder as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the air around the cemetery became unnaturally cold. In the 1960s, a teenager named James, who had heard the rumors of the haunted playground, decided to test the stories for himself. He snuck into the cemetery after midnight, intending to prove that there was nothing to the rumors. As he stood in front of the swings, a strange feeling washed over him, something cold and unexplainable. Suddenly, the chains on the swings began to rattle. The laughter of children filled the air, so real and clear that it sounded like it was coming from right behind him. Terrified, James ran from the playground, swearing never to return. He later told friends that he had seen the shadow of a child standing at the edge of the swings, though when he looked back, there was no one there. To understand why the Dead Children's Playground is so haunted, one must look into the tragic history of the children buried in Maple Hill Cemetery. The stories of many of these children are heartbreaking. Many died from common childhood diseases that took their lives far too young, while others were victims of tragic accidents. One of the most haunting stories associated with the cemetery is that of a little girl named Lily Thompson. Lily was just 4 years old when she tragically fell into a well on her family's property. The town was devastated by her death, and her parents were so overcome with grief that they had a large stone monument erected in her memory in the cemetery. It is said that Lily's spirit still wanders the grounds, and she has been seen near the playground, her small, pale figure appearing as a shadow in the moonlight. Another story is that of a young boy named Thomas, who died of the Spanish flu at the age of 6. His family had already lost 2 other children to the disease, and Thomas was the last of their surviving children. After his death, his parents were so distraught that they spent hours at his grave, even after their own health began to fail. It is said that Thomas's spirit, along with the spirits of the other children, remains restless, bound to the cemetery and the playground. As the years passed, the haunting surrounding the Dead Children's Playground grew more intense. The sounds of laughter became impossible to ignore, and those who visited after dark began to report seeing strange figures standing near the swings, figures that would vanish when approached. Some claimed to have heard soft whispers calling their names, or even felt invisible hands brushing against their skin. One of the most disturbing reports came in the late 1970s, when a couple visited the cemetery on a moonlit night. As they stood near the swings, they heard a child's voice calling out to them. It was soft at first, but it quickly grew louder, as though the child was calling for help. When they turned to look, they saw a young girl in a white dress standing at the edge of the swings. The girl's face was pale, her eyes hollow and empty, and her mouth stretched into a haunting, wide smile. Before the couple could react, the girl vanished into the darkness. Another terrifying encounter happened to a group of teens who decided to visit the playground in the 1980s. As they walked past the swings, they noticed that one of the seats was swinging back and forth, though there was no wind. When one of the teens dared to sit on the swing, it immediately stopped moving. But the group didn't leave. Instead, they continued their investigation. That night, they were followed by the sound of children laughing, their voices echoing in every direction. The group later reported feeling a strong sense of dread, as though they were being watched by unseen eyes. Today, the Dead Children's Playground remains a site of fascination and terror for visitors to Huntsville. Though the playground itself is still functional, and children do play there during the day, few dare to visit after dark. Local legend has it that the spirits of the children still haunt the swings, their laughter echoing through the trees, their restless souls seeking solace, or perhaps something more, revenge for their untimely deaths. Some claim to have seen figures in white, ghostly children who appear only at night, standing by the swings, silently watching those who approach. Others claim that if you visit on a particularly dark night, you can hear the faint sound of a child's voice calling your name, just before the laughter begins again. Whether the Dead Children's Playground is truly haunted by the spirits of the lost children buried in Maple Hill Cemetery, or whether it is a place where grief and superstition have converged, one thing is certain. It remains a place where the line between the living and the dead is disturbingly thin. And for those who dare to visit, it will forever be a reminder of the children whose lives were cut short, their spirits never able to leave the playground where they once played. Story 29. Emily's Bridge, Vermont. Nestled in the small town of Stowe, Vermont, lies one of the most haunted spots in New England, Emily's Bridge. This covered bridge, located on a quiet, rural road, has become a focal point for eerie stories, ghostly encounters, and the dark legend of Emily, a young woman whose tragic fate is said to have cursed the bridge for eternity. Over the years, the bridge has become infamous for its eerie atmosphere, strange noises, and unexplained occurrences, drawing both paranormal enthusiasts and curious thrill seekers. The tale of Emily's Bridge is one that blends love, betrayal, and death, an unsettling story of a young woman whose sorrowful spirit has never truly left the place where she met her untimely end. Emily's Bridge, also known as the Gold Brook Covered Bridge, was constructed in the mid-1800s, connecting two rural areas of Stowe. Covered bridges, once common throughout the rural parts of Vermont, are now relics of a bygone era, and Emily's Bridge is one of the few still standing, attracting visitors both for its scenic beauty and its mysterious reputation. The legend of Emily, however, is not as old as the bridge itself. According to local lore, Emily was a young woman from Stowe in the 19th century, full of life and with a bright future ahead of her. She had fallen deeply in love with a man, a local man who had promised her his heart and his forever. The two were set to marry, and Emily was said to be overjoyed at the prospect of starting a new life together. However, the story takes a dark turn. As the wedding day approached, Emily's fiancé mysteriously disappeared, leaving her heartbroken and desperate for answers. Emily searched everywhere, asking neighbors, friends, and anyone who might know where he had gone, but no one seemed to have any information. Days turned into weeks, and then into months, but there was no sign of him. Emily's grief grew into madness, and she became obsessed with the idea that he had abandoned her. Some versions of the story suggest that Emily learned the truth, that her fiancé had, in fact, been seeing another woman. Distraught, Emily allegedly confronted him, but he denied her accusations and ended the relationship coldly. The betrayal broke Emily's heart, and some versions of the tale suggest that Emily attempted to confront her fiancé at the bridge, hoping for reconciliation. But instead of a reunion, tragedy struck. On the night Emily was to meet her fiancé at Gold Brook Covered Bridge, the young woman's heart was filled with hope and despair in equal measure. She waited under the bridge, perhaps believing he would return and apologize. But as the hours passed and darkness descended, Emily's hope faded. In some accounts, Emily's fiancé arrived at the bridge, but instead of reconciling with her, he cruelly rejected her, confirming the rumors she had heard. The exact details of what transpired that night remain unclear, but according to legend, Emily, unable to bear the pain of betrayal and loss, took her own life. Some stories say she hung herself from one of the bridge's wooden beams, while others claim she jumped from the bridge into the rushing waters below. Regardless of the method, her tragic death is said to have cast a dark shadow over the bridge. It is said that Emily's spirit became trapped in the place where she met her untimely end, her sorrow and anger creating an energy that has haunted the bridge ever since. The bridge, which had once been a simple and practical structure for travelers crossing the brook below, soon became a site of supernatural activity. Visitors reported strange noises, sounds of footsteps echoing on the bridge when no one was around, and the faint rustling of clothing as though someone were walking near them, even when the area was completely empty. As time went on, tales of Emily's restless spirit grew. Local residents and visitors alike spoke of sightings of a pale, sorrowful figure standing near the bridge. The ghostly woman was often seen wearing a white dress, her hair flowing in the wind, standing motionless at the entrance to the bridge, as if waiting for someone. Some claimed to have seen her walking slowly across the bridge, disappearing into the mist on the other side, while others reported hearing her mournful sobs in the dead of night. One of the most commonly reported phenomena associated with Emily's Bridge is the sound of the heavy creaking of the bridge's wooden beams. Some claim that this is the sound of Emily's spirit walking across the bridge, her weight causing the boards to bend and groan, just as they would have when she was alive. The haunting at Emily's Bridge has drawn many paranormal investigators, as well as those simply curious about the strange occurrences at the site. It is a hot spot for ghost hunters who seek to connect with Emily's spirit and uncover more about her tragic past. Numerous people, including those simply passing by, have reported strange experiences when they've stopped at the bridge at night. Visitors often describe feeling an eerie chill in the air, despite the warmth of summer nights. Others report feeling a sudden heaviness in their chest or an overwhelming sense of sadness and despair, as though they, too, are experiencing Emily's sorrow. One of the most common experiences is the sound of Emily's voice. Many claim to hear her whispering in the wind, calling out for her lost love, or sometimes even crying softly in the darkness. Some visitors have tried to communicate with her, calling out her name or asking questions, only to be met with a cold breeze or the sudden flicker of lights. It's as though Emily's spirit is still waiting for something, waiting for a closure that never came in her lifetime. One particularly chilling encounter occurred when a group of friends visited Emily's bridge late one night. As they stood on the bridge, they heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching from behind. Turning around, they saw nothing but the empty, moonlit bridge. Yet the sound of footsteps continued, growing louder and louder, as though someone was walking toward them. Fearing they were being followed, the group ran from the bridge, but the footsteps didn't stop. They echoed behind them all the way until they reached their car. Today, Emily's Bridge remains one of the most iconic haunted locations in Vermont, attracting those with an interest in the paranormal and the supernatural. The tragic love story of Emily continues to capture the imagination of those who hear it, and the bridge has become a symbol of heartbreak and loss. Whether or not Emily's spirit truly lingers there is up for debate, but the countless reports of strange phenomena suggest that something powerful resides within the bridge's weathered beams. Some locals have tried to explain the haunting as a product of the bridge's isolation, the wind, and natural sounds creating illusions of footsteps and voices. But for many, the legend of Emily is real, and the bridge stands as a testament to her undying sorrow. The truth remains elusive, leaving visitors with one final, chilling thought. Emily may still be waiting for her lost love, and those who visit her bridge may hear her call if they listen closely enough. In the end, the bridge serves as a reminder that love, loss, and the spirits of the past often linger far longer than we expect. Whether or not Emily's restless spirit can ever find peace is something only time will tell, but until then, her story continues to haunt the quiet town of Stowe, Vermont, and the covered bridge where she met her tragic end. Story 30. The Man in the Hat, Nevada. In the arid expanses of Nevada, tucked away in the eerie silence of the desert, there lies a story that has haunted locals and visitors alike for decades. The legend of the Man in the Hat. This mysterious figure, often seen late at night or during the early hours of dawn, has become a fixture of paranormal folklore in the small town of Ely, Nevada, and the surrounding desert region. Though the true nature of the Man in the Hat remains elusive, his presence continues to stir fear and fascination in equal measure. This chilling tale blends the stark loneliness of the desert with the unsettling uncertainty of the supernatural, creating an atmosphere that lingers in the minds of those who encounter him. With his tall, shadowy figure and wide-brimmed hat that hides his face, the Man in the Hat has become one of Nevada's most haunting legends, a mystery that defies logical explanation. Ely, Nevada, a small, quiet town nestled in the eastern part of the state, has a rich history of mining, railroads, and hard-won survival. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, the town thrived as a vital railroad and mining hub, with the surrounding desert becoming home to workers, settlers, and fortune-seekers alike. Yet, alongside the promise of wealth and discovery, there came a darker side to the town's history, one that would later give rise to a number of strange and unsettling tales, with the most prominent being the legend of the Man in the Hat. The first sightings of the mysterious figure date back to the mid-1900s, around the time Ely was still a bustling town full of industry and promise. Locals recall the first whispers of the figure appearing along the remote desert roads, particularly those leading into the mountains or through mining sites long abandoned. The earliest reports came from travelers passing through Ely, many of whom claimed to see a tall figure wearing a wide-brimmed hat standing alone in the distance. One of the first sightings came from a trucker who had driven into Ely late one evening. As he pulled off the main highway to rest, he noticed a figure in the distance, tall, dark, and with a broad-brimmed hat that obscured the person's face. Initially thinking it was just another traveler, the trucker didn't pay much attention until the figure began moving. The man seemed to walk with an unnatural gait, and as the trucker stared, he felt an inexplicable sense of dread creep over him. Deciding to drive past the figure to make sure everything was all right, the trucker noticed something even stranger. Though he had driven down the road for several miles, the figure was still in his peripheral vision, standing perfectly still, watching him as he passed. The trucker hurriedly drove off, but when he glanced in his rearview mirror, the figure had vanished without a trace, leaving only the quiet expanse of desert behind him. This was not an isolated incident. Over the years, more sightings were reported, with people describing the same figure in similar circumstances, always appearing at the periphery of vision, always in the deep desert or by abandoned mining towns, and always leaving an unsettling sense of dread. Despite the varying reports, one common description emerged. The figure was tall, with an imposing presence that seemed to cast a shadow far larger than his physical form. He was typically seen wearing a long, dark coat or cloak, which billowed out as if it had a life of its own. The most distinctive feature of the man in the hat, however, was his wide-brimmed hat, which obscured his face, leaving only a shadow in the place where his features should have been. Some said the hat resembled a large fedora, others a wide-brimmed cowboy hat, but all agreed that the brim of the hat cast a dark shadow over the figure's face, preventing anyone from seeing his eyes or any expression. The figure was often described as standing motionless at the side of the road or walking slowly along deserted paths, as if he were waiting for something or someone. What made the man in the hat so unnerving was the complete lack of movement or interaction. Witnesses reported that when they tried to approach him, he remained perfectly still, as though he was simply a fixture of the landscape. In some accounts, his presence seemed to distort the atmosphere, as if time slowed when he appeared. People who came close often reported feeling an overwhelming sense of unease or being watched, but when they turned to leave or look away, the figure would either vanish or remain in the same position, unblinking and unyielding. There are some encounters with the man in the hat that go beyond visual sightings. Many individuals who have crossed paths with the mysterious figure describe an intense feeling of being followed or pursued, without ever actually seeing him close. Those who drove along certain stretches of remote roads late at night often spoke of the feeling that someone was walking just behind them, invisible but very real in their sense of presence. One particularly unsettling account comes from a couple who had decided to take a late-night drive through the desert near Ely. As they drove down a quiet, dirt road, they noticed a shadow dart across their headlights. The couple initially thought it was an animal, but when they slowed down to investigate, they found nothing. They continued down the road, but the sensation of being followed intensified, as if something unseen was close behind them. The couple recalled feeling a cold rush of air sweep across the car and hearing a soft, eerie whispering, though no one else was around. The woman, terrified, swore that she could feel a pair of unseen eyes staring at her from outside the car. Her heart raced as the feeling grew stronger, and soon, they found themselves turning back toward town, not stopping until they were safely inside the hotel. The following morning, they discovered that the road they had been on was one of the most common areas for sightings of the man in the hat. Over time, the story of the man in the hat evolved into an iconic legend in Ely. While the stories shared common elements, the true origin of the figure remained unknown. Several theories have emerged to explain the presence of the man in the hat, each offering a different perspective on who or what he could be. One of the most popular theories is that the figure is a ghost, the restless spirit of a miner or railroad worker who met a tragic fate. Ely, after all, has a long history of mining accidents and violent deaths, and many speculate that the man in the hat could be the lingering spirit of someone who died in a tragic event, perhaps a victim of a mining collapse or a worker killed during the railroad construction. These workers, many of whom were forgotten in life, might have left behind vengeful or sorrowful spirits that still wander the land where they once toiled. Another theory suggests that the man in the hat could be an ancient entity, a supernatural being connected to the desert itself. In many cultures, the desert is seen as a place where spirits and powerful forces roam, and some believe the figure is not a ghost at all, but rather a manifestation of the land's ancient energy. According to this theory, the man is an enigmatic guardian of the desert, a figure who watches over the remote stretches of Nevada, appearing only to those who dare to venture too far off the beaten path. Yet another theory posits that the man in the hat could be a shadow of a bygone era, a representation of lost time. The mysterious figure may not be a spirit, but a remnant of the past, an apparition that appears when the veil between worlds is thin. His wide-brimmed hat and long coat evoke a sense of the past, of an era long gone, but still lingering in the corners of the world. Today, the legend of the man in the hat endures, becoming a part of Ely's identity and a topic of conversation among locals and visitors. While some dismiss the sightings as mere coincidence or figments of imagination, others swear by the encounters, sharing their stories with a sense of conviction that can't be ignored. The figure of the man in the hat remains one of Nevada's most intriguing and chilling mysteries. Whether he is the ghost of a miner, a supernatural being, or something far more enigmatic, his presence continues to haunt the desert landscape. Those who venture through Ely or the surrounding desolate roads may find themselves crossing paths with this spectral figure, standing quietly in the desert, waiting, watching, and vanishing without a trace. The man in the hat is a shadow of the past, a presence that lingers in the Nevada desert, a symbol of all that is mysterious and unexplained. And for those who encounter him, his appearance will be a reminder that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved, forever trapped in the eerie silence of the desert night. Wow, that was a lot of spine-chilling stories from across the United States. From haunted hotels to ghostly figures that refuse to leave, it's hard to ignore the eerie mysteries that lurk in the shadows. Which one of these terrifying tales gave you the creeps the most? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed these spine-tingling stories, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another terrifying tale. And don't forget to click the bell icon so you'll be the first to know when I post more creepy content like this. Thank you, goodbye, see you next time. Keep your lights on and your eyes open.